All right, well, thank you all for coming to this event. We're happy to be yet another University of Michigan department that's coming to visit UTEP. We are the Cognition and Cognitive Neuroscience Department, and today we'll be having a program about psychological research, what it entails, and how to get involved in it. So now I'll go ahead and pass over the mic to Dr. Castañeda.
Good morning. Right now it's only you, Brittany, so you know me pretty well, and you know how much of a proponent I am for the University of Michigan. Having gone there, I started going there back in 1980. The experiences that I had there were just tremendous. I'm a first generation. Are you first generation? Degree?
Sorry?
Your parents have a college degree?
Yes, my dad does.
Yeah, okay. So during our graduation ceremonies, you know how the president always asks people to stand up as their first generation? And overwhelmingly over half of them stand up, and it's just a moving experience. Getting to the next step is really important, and believing that you are part of the population that can become a graduate student, that can eventually become an independent research investigator, is something that we have to entrain into the thinking, into the pattern of thoughts in our students. And so I really appreciate all of these students and Dr. Wiseman coming here to spend their time to talk to you and talk to you about the space that they have for you. So I think this is really awesome. It made a big difference in my life. And I think that's important for people to see somebody like me who left El Paso, widened my perspective about what science is in a global way. And then to eventually, I never thought I was coming back, because when I got my first tenure track, it was at Arizona State. And I fell in love with Arizona, but the duty to students like you called me back to El Paso. So when I had an opportunity, I had no choice but to say, yes, I can do this. And so it's been very impactful for me to have gone to Michigan. And I know that's what they have to offer for students. And so I was happy to be a part of this working group. I'm back to you, Natasha.
Thank you so much. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start off session one. So a brief introduction of myself. I'm Natasha Vernoy. I am a second-year Psychology Ph.D. student in the Cognition and Cognitive Neuroscience area. I study bilingual cognition. And so session one is going to be an overview of what you can do with a Psychology Ph.D. in terms of like career options, whether that's in academia or in the industry. And then a few grad students will present about their research and specifically what they do in grad school. If you have any questions during this session, please just send me a private message on Zoom. And then at the end, I'll read them out to the presenter so they can answer. And so if you need to find me, it's just Natasha Vernoy. I'm the host of this session. So it's just Natasha and then V with a lot of vowels. All right. I will now hand it over to Dr. Emily Vargas and Dr. Daniel Weissman. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, Brittany. I'm just going to get the slides going, so just 1 second.
Hi, Brittany. Emily will present most of this, but I'll chime in as needed.
Okay.
Nope. Okay. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hello, Brittany. Thank you for being here. No pressure on you. So I am Emily Vargas. I didn't introduce myself before because I was just about to introduce myself right now at the very first session. So I received my PhD in psychology from the University of Michigan, and just last year actually. And I received it in the area of personality psychology. So it's a bit different than the group here. However, I am currently a postdoctoral fellow at Northwestern University, specifically in the Department of Preventive Medicine. And as someone who is, has already recently achieved a PhD and is looking into like the future paths of what to do with this, I figured I could speak about my experience of some, at least the academic path, but also some other paths that you could pursue after you receive your PhD.
And I thought I could speak about these issues too, even though I'm a little crustier and older.
So here we are presenting 3 interesting career paths in psychology. So first, obviously, for any of these career paths, you have to pursue a PhD. And it's useful, but also extremely helpful for not just the academic path, but for a lot of different job options that people don't necessarily know about. So step one is getting a PhD. And it seems like perhaps at this stage, you have some research experience, is what it sounds like. That's the best thing that we can recommend right now, if this is something you're interested in, is getting some research experience and testing out different labs, perhaps working with a variety of professors, seeing what kind of things you're really interested in studying. Because those are the things you learn through experience. And so we have, the first point is start by getting some research experience. And the second is choose an area of study. So this goes along with getting research experience. You can get experience in cognitive psychology, social, personality. There's a lot of different sub areas of psychology which may be of interest to you. And so perhaps it's worth taking classes in these different things, but also getting some research experience and seeing what is appealing to you. And then in thinking about this further, you can then pursue a specific area of psychology as part of your PhD. So then you would apply to graduate schools and then, of course, hopefully get accepted, which is the ultimate goal. And then once you're in the PhD program, the next step is to learn how to conduct research, and you're publishing papers as a graduate student. And so the goal of this is to push the boundaries of human knowledge forward. And that, I think, is one of the most exciting things about doing the PhD, is like what you're contributing. And so as far as my own experience, like every day, I'm doing some sort of work related to publishing papers and getting these things out there and getting our findings out there. Let's see. In the process, you also learn other skills that are not just research related, but other things tied to the PhD. So learning how to teach and mentor other students. I have taught, I've been a GSI, or in University of Michigan. It stands for Graduate Student Instructor. And perhaps you've had experience working with some of them before, but you get a lot of hands-on experience about how do you teach a small class, a discussion section, a large lecture, how do you work directly with students? And that to me was some of the best experiences. I've met some great people doing so. And so that was one of my favorite things of doing my PhD. And then also you acquire really important job skills that apply not just for the academic track, but also for other potential paths about what you can do later on with your PhD. So you learn a lot about hypothesis testing, problem solving, scientific writing, which goes in part with the publications that you produce from your work, project management skills, computer programming with one or more languages. You have a lot of interdisciplinary training depending on your work. So in my position, I work a lot with epidemiologists, psychologists, and medical doctors, specifically cardiologists. And that goes, it also ties to the next point of teamwork and oral presentation skills. I think one of my favorite things is statistics. So if you like that, then this is definitely the path for you. And then also, you can learn specific skill sets related to your discipline. So brain imaging is something that a lot of people may learn as part of their PhD. Okay, and also let me know, oh, you said the question thing was in the chat, but if you want to speak up, I will not prevent you. Okay, so the 3 career paths. So let's say you are on this PhD path and you are like, okay, great, I have this PhD, now what do I do? So there are 3 general paths you can take. There's first the academic, second is industry, and the third is government or nonprofit. So the first is the academic path, and this is the path that I'm on, so I'm going to speak from my own experience here. One of the things you can do after is become a postdoctoral fellow to prepare you to become a faculty member. And generally this is like a 2 to 3 year position. It can be longer depending on your field. And generally what you're doing during this time is broadening your research interests and learning new research methods. You're often expanding your collaborations. You're doing a lot of work in your field, and you're learning a lot of new skill sets. So the second point is doing more research and publishing more papers is generally the theme of like what you're achieving. And then something that I will be doing this upcoming fall is now applying for faculty positions. So compared to where I was as a 5th year PhD student, I'm actually in a much better place right now and much more competitive for certain faculty positions. And you can choose an exciting location to live in. So I love the city. I'm from the East Coast, and I'm like, I want to live in Chicago. And so here I am doing my postdoc in the middle of Chicago, which is really exciting.
Can I just chime in for 1 second?
Yes.
So on the broaden your research interests and learn new methods. So when I got my PhD, it was at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And that's a good place to study as an undergraduate, or actually even as a graduate student, because it's surrounded by cornfields. So there's not much else to do. You just kind of hide in the library. But when I was there, I mainly did research that involved measuring reaction time and accuracy while people did tasks that were pretty simple on a computer screen, just push buttons on a keyboard to indicate what you see or hear. But I wanted to learn brain imaging, and I was very interested in cognitive neuroscience. So I ultimately went to Duke University in North Carolina, and that's where I learned functional MRI. So that's sort of an example of just learning a new research method, and that was my goal. And I wanted to learn that to study the brain mechanisms underlying attention. But I also had this thought, kind of like Dr. Vargas, which was, oh, I want to go to Chicago. Well, I thought, oh, I want to go somewhere warmer than Illinois because it gets very cold in those cornfields in the winter. But in North Carolina, it's kind of nice and warm. And I had this sneaking suspicion that someday I might wind up taking a faculty position someplace cold. And I was right. Because in Michigan, the summers are great, but it's a little cooler in the winter. And so I tried to choose as an exciting location as I could. So anyway, I agree with everything else that Dr. Vargas said, but I just wanted to add that really choosing someplace where you want to live and where you can learn a new method can be very gratifying and help your career a lot, especially if you become an expert in the new things that you learn.
Yep, I completely agree. Thank you for adding that in.
If I can add to that.
Yes.
Because I'm from El Paso, and I see you have a picture of Santa Barbara there. That's the first school that accepted me for graduate school. And I had the message in my head that I would never get into any program. And when they accepted me, I was all set. I had a brochure that said, do you want the dorm room with a window facing the mountains or one facing the ocean? And so, oh my God, it was a dream come true. Then Michigan called. And when they sent me up to visit Ann Arbor, just the resources, the medical facilities, and the research that goes on throughout the whole campus was just overwhelmingly impactful for me. The winters are colder than in El Paso. There's quite a bit more snow, but part of moving forward is adapting, not just in our scientific knowledge, but in our work and living environment. Is something that I learned. You get to learn new ways of thinking about things because different people from different experiences, because they have different backgrounds, just broadens our own perspectives. And so to be at a place like Ann Arbor that is so multicultural was really a game changer for me. I think I'm more analytical, more open-minded, more accepting to the kind of diversity that exists because of my experiences at Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I love Ann Arbor as well. It was one of the best experiences that I've had. And I actually loved it more than undergrad, to be honest. So I would recommend. Okay, so moving on. So we're talking about the first academic, one of the paths, the academic path. And if you do pursue a postdoc, it's with perhaps the goal that you would be going on to the faculty track. So this is kind of like that second step within the first path. So getting a faculty position or becoming a professor, which is something that a lot of us in university settings are aware of this path because of who we're working with and who we're around and who we often see. So of course, some of the benefits of this are shaping the minds of the next generation. It's really exciting and fulfilling work to do this. There are some positions that are more research focused. So a lot of your work and time is dedicated to conducting research and doing these publications, like we said, at a typically university setting. And there's also some positions that are more teaching focused. And so a lot of those individuals will be spending their time teaching students, mentoring, and it could be taking place at a place like a liberal arts college, which is both of them are great options. And then here are some colleagues that we have included as part of, who are representing the faculty position path. Okay, so this next path is what we are classifying broadly as industry. So this is the non-academic route, and it's kind of we have quite a broad list here, but we think it's pretty expansive of the options that are available. And of course, there's more beyond this, but this is just to give you a nice overview of what this could look like. And so from other grad students that I've had the pleasure of like spending time with and just through conversations with people, here are some places where we have written down where individuals have gone with their PhD and possible routes of what they could do. So some people could work at Google or Facebook, primarily for data analytics, when you get those skills of how to analyze, answering research questions. A lot of those companies, tech companies specifically, are looking for people who have these skills, and they're constantly seeking individuals all the time. So another,
In
yeah,
fact,
go ahead.
I just wanted to add quickly. In fact, we just had one of our recent PhDs come back who works for Facebook, I think, last year, and tell us all about what that's like. She has a lot of data analysis skills that she got as in her PhD program. And what was really interesting to me was she told us that the way she gets a big bonus from, I believe it's Facebook, like, you know, is that if somebody proposes a project that's going to cost millions of dollars and she finds something wrong with it and makes the project not happen, then she gets a big bonus, because apparently that saves the company a lot of money if they don't just do every single project that somebody thinks of and costs millions of dollars. Anyway, that was just something that really requires, I think, a lot of analytical and kind of experimental design skills, like being able to look at a data set and kind of test hypotheses and figure out if it's looking good or not.
Absolutely. And to add on to that, certain skill sets that you could acquire perhaps in the area of CCN are imaging. So there's an example of an individual who was really skilled at fMRI and was really good at working with images. And so had a job at Adobe Photoshop relating to image creation and manipulation software. And so they thought that that was a really strong skill set of that person. Other things include educational testing services, because often psychologists in many fields are trained in cognitive measures and psychometrics and things like that that could be helpful for these testing services. And there's also an example of someone working at Sonos, which is this company in which this person was looking at human-computer interactions in the context of people and work. And so that's a very specific question, but sometimes these places have specific questions. I have a friend who works at Indeed.com basically as an engineer. And one of the things that she really loves about the industry route is the, like how much you can get paid, just to be completely honest. She really loves that she gets bonuses all the time and they really value her work. And it's a different sort of model than academia, but she finds a lot of gratification in it. And I also have a friend here in Chicago who uses his skill set of knowing how to read a scientific paper and interpret the findings and then communicate that. And he works in a PR firm that is specific to pharmaceuticals. And so being able to communicate the scientific literature is something that people are also looking for. Okay, so the last branch of this is government and nonprofit. And in here, there's a lot of different options that people can pursue. The first is American Institutes of Research, in which there are large-scale studies funded by the government. So there may be questions like, oh, if we implement this sort of thing in this area of the US, does it make an impact on these sorts of outcomes? And you can use your analytic skills to examine if that's true.
So just one brief example, we had a graduate from our department who did research on educational psychology, and whenever he found a result, it would go into a journal article but never have an impact in the real world. And so he went to work for the American Institutes of Research, and I guess they get grants from a lot of government grants, and they're to do things like introduce a new textbook in the state of Texas in high schools, and then study how test scores change after this new textbook is introduced. So he felt like his interests in educational psychology studying that had a much greater impact. And when I spoke to him about what his daily work was like, he said it's very similar to what it's like in academia. He's designing experiments, he's analyzing data. It's just that he has this larger real world impact by working for this government institution.
Absolutely. And to add on to that, one could work for the Democratic or Republican national committees that govern the political parties. There is a new thing called the Open Science Framework, which promotes open science practices, which I'm not sure if it's something you've heard about, but this is a growing area, and so there's a lot of attention toward this. There's also the National Institutes of Health and other health-based organizations. So they're always looking for research scientists to take part in this to public data and distribution and overseeing and maintaining sometimes longitudinal medical cohort studies. In addition, this one's a good one. My friend works at Catalyst, which is I believe it's a nonprofit. And so she was actually from my area of psychology, personality, and she studies workplace equity. And so she works there pretty much just doing data analysis and answering questions like, are there enough women in a specific work context, as an example? And so she finds this is a great fit for her because it's very meaningful. Like the research questions at that place are very meaningful for her. In addition, there's also Department of Justice in California, but also in other states or other departments as well, working on a variety of justice-related issues. There's also the Mind Research Institute, which conducts education and neuroscience research, and specific areas like the Conservation for Colorado, advocating for environmental issues, in which I think there is someone who is an expert in writing grants, which is a skill set that you can acquire as a PhD and then apply it towards a specific agency.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, that last one is a recent graduate of our department as well, who was very interested in environmental issues and became a grant writer for this Conservation Colorado group. So that's the end of our presentation. And I think if Natasha's still there, maybe we can move on to the next part.
Yeah, so next we will be hearing from Quinn, who will be presenting on motor learning.
Yes, so let me start the screen share.
And just as a, while she's starting her screen share for the students here, we're going to be voting. So these are going to be a series of 3 5-minute presentations on from different graduate students that quickly summarize their work. And at the end of the presentations, well, after each presentation, there'll be a little time for questions. And then I think at the end, there'll be a vote where you have to vote for the best presentation. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, could you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So let's get started then. Hi, welcome to my presentation titled Distinct Causal Roles of the UPEP-C and M1 in Long-Term Motor Expertise. In case you are unfamiliar, the UPEP-C refers to the frontal region in the brain, and M1 is the motor area. Our motivation for the study is how past studies have shown that activity in these regions tend to decrease with skill. However, different explanations can be given to the same observed behavior. While reduced activity can be associated with reduced importance of cognitive control, it can also be said to reflect increased efficiency. Another limitation in the current literatures is that most of them involve changes over short time scales. Seeking a more definitive answer to these conflicting accounts, we combine longitudinal behavioral training, neurostimulation, and neuroimaging to learn how disruption in the UPEP-C and M1 will affect performance and representation of long-term motor skills. To provide some background on neurostimulation, transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS for short, is a method to stimulate the brain. In this method, a peculiarly shaped tool that looks like number 8 is moved close to the head. The electric current in this coil will induce a magnetic field around it, which in turn induces electric current in the brain. Many stimulation patterns are available. For example, the continuous theta burst stimulation, or CTBS for short, utilizes a burst every 200 milliseconds. The use of TMS allows us to make causal inferences about the relationship between the disrupted brain region and performance, so that we can answer whether the decreased activation reflects reduced importance or increased efficiency. Furthermore, if it's true that the role of the UPFC is de-emphasized with training, we investigate the potential benefits of the UPFC disruption for expert skill level. To these ends, we utilize a discrete sequence production task, or DSP task for short. This task consists of a queue phase in which a color rectangle will appear on the screen. Its color signals the sequence to appear next. Then a row of 4 rectangles will be displayed, and the subject must press the corresponding left finger according to whichever rectangle lights up until all 8 elements of the sequence are pressed or error or timeout. At the beginning of their participation, the subject will first go through a baseline brain scan using magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI for short. For the 6 weeks following that scan, they will be trained on the DSP task, which comes in 6 different sequences of 3 training depths: minimal, moderate, or extensive. These depths differ in how frequently their sequences are trained. Once the training period is over, we will apply TMS to certain brain regions in the subject and perform fMRI again to identify any effects due to the TMS-induced disruption. And the 3 brain regions of interest are the right DOPFC, the right M1, and we also apply TMS to the vertex region as a control condition, meaning that we don't expect stimulation at this region to have any effect on behavioral performance. So looking firstly at the behavioral results, this is the training data from one example subject. And we can see that different training depths, like extensive in blue, moderate in green, and minimal in red, constitute different segments of the same learning trajectory. This enables us to compare different levels of motor skills simultaneously for the same subject. Next, this is the testing data after the subject has finished the 6-week period of training, and we have applied TMS on the subject. And it shows that the UPFC and M1, so orange and blue curve, have lower accuracy than the control condition, which is the green vertex curve. Here, the vertex results can serve as the baseline for our computation of a cost due to TMS disruption. So defining cost as the difference between frontal and vertex and between motor and vertex, this is the result that we have. And we see that both the UPFC, the orange, and the motor, the blue curve, impairs performance at all training depths, evident in the negative cost in all data points. And furthermore, we see a double dissociation in which causal importance of the UPFC, the orange curve, diminishes with training. So the absolute value of the cost decreases, going from left to right, whereas that of M1 grows. So going back to our original research questions, this finding seems to be in line with the commonly held belief that about the link between reduced UPFC activity and cognitive release, and between reduced M1 activity and increased efficiency. However, since TMS always leads to a decreased performance accuracy, it seems that releasing frontal control doesn't improve performance. Thank you for your attention, and please let us know if you have any questions. So that's all for my presentation.
All right, thank you. And now we will hand over the metaphorical mic to Logan, who will be presenting on visualizations and communication.
Hi. So let me set up my screen share. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Hi, so my name is Logan. I'm a second-year PhD student at the University of Michigan. And I'm here today to talk to you about the role of animation and interactivity in the way that people learn from visualizations. So kind of to start off by motivating this, why do we care about data visualization in the first place? So often it can help us to more clearly explain some data that we have or a scientific finding that we want to communicate. So picture a giant table with a bunch of NBA scores in it. It's much harder to get anything out of that than it is if you do it in a chart like on the right here, which I've taken from 538. It's much easier to tell a story when you do it visually, and that's quite well established. And that's evidenced by the fact that visualization is becoming especially popular in journalism. So a bunch of different places like the New York Times, Washington Post, Bloomberg, they all have their own department of people that visualize data, and that's their job. And also it's becoming more popular among hobbyists. So there's an entire subreddit dedicated to people building visualizations and sharing them with each other. But as visualizations go online, they get more and more sophisticated. So you can have all these interesting sort of animated and interactive visualizations like this. But one question is, that looks nice, but is that helpful beyond just showing somebody a static visualization? Do you get anything new out of showing the animation and the interactivity? So if we show the same visualization to people, but with and without animation, do people understand the data differently? Likewise, if we make it interactive or not interactive, does that change anything? That's the question that we'd like to investigate. So our group is using a fairly timely topic for this, which is COVID-19. So our imagined scenario is there's a community of 200 people, and we're going to start with 1% of them, it's 2 people, being infected today. And the question is, what's going to happen in 30 days? And as you might have guessed, oh, there we go. As you might have guessed, the answer heavily depends on how people behave. So on the left is what a simulation of that might look like if no one practices social distancing or any sort of precaution, if everyone just carries on as usual. As you can see, by the end of the 30 days, a lot of people are infected. But on the right would be what would happen if everyone stays at home and practices social distancing. So what I'm showing you here is sort of a static graph that shows you a story, right? I can tell you what these graphs correspond to, and I can just show them to you. But the question that we're interested in is, if we show you an animated version of this, an animated simulation, is that going to help you understand better, or is that going to make you believe it more? And I'm going to actually pull up a different window here and show you a simulation. So what I'm about to show you, there's a bunch of dots. Each dot, there's 200 of them. Each corresponds to 1 person. So we have 200 dots, 200 people. The blue dots are healthy people. The yellow dots are people who are infected but don't know yet, so they're not showing symptoms. And the red dots are people who are infected and showing symptoms. Can everyone still see?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So as we can see, it started out slow and it looked like it wasn't spreading very fast. But as soon as just a few people get infected, it starts to skyrocket. So this would be an example of showing you a visualization that has animation, but isn't interactive. So we could compare and contrast this with the static visualization I showed you before of just those charts. And the way that we would investigate this is we would have two groups of people. One group would be shown the static graphs, and one group would be shown this interactive or this animated graph, and we would have survey questions before and after about their feelings about the effectiveness of social distancing and their feelings about the relative risk of COVID-19. But one of the key things that we're also interested in besides animation is interactivity. So I'm going to get some audience participation here. We can pick an age range of people that are going to try and stay 6 feet away from everyone else. Does anyone want to?
Is that an age group?
Yeah, give me like an age range, like from an age to an age.
18 to 25.
Okay. So we're gonna say everyone from the age 18 to the age 25 is now going to try and stay 6 feet apart from other people. And actually, let's have them wear masks as well. So as you can see, some of the dots now have a white covering on them, so that's the mask. And the little circle around them is sort of their personal space bubble. And you can see that they try to move away from other people when other people enter the bubble. But as you might be noticing, the disease is still spreading, and as you can see from the graph, it's not overly different from other people, or from the previous simulation. And that's mostly because there's just not enough people practicing the precaution, and if not enough people are doing it, it doesn't work out. So in any case, the actual interface we would show to people is a little less technical looking. It looks like this. I would have demonstrated on this, but there's some additional features in the one I just showed you, so I wanted to show that one. But the idea is that it's the same. We would give them a survey before before interacting with this, and then a survey after, and we see how much their beliefs change, and we try to compare that to a group that just had a static visualization or that had an animated one but didn't have the ability to customize things or to interact. And yeah, this is still ongoing work, so we don't have any results yet, but yeah, we're curious to know what you think would happen, actually. And yeah, that's it.
So Logan, it seems that you have to have an understanding of the right critical thresholds to start to make behavioral changes or outcomes in, for example, the spread of the virus. Because if you choose a certain set of parameters and don't go beyond that, it's going to look like the message is, well, distancing and putting on a mask doesn't work. But obviously, it was limited to one age group when so many others are interacting unprotected.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely the case. And kind of our hope is that people would try out many combinations of this, and they would see that if you select a large number of groups or like a very wide age range for these things, that it does become effective. But if you pick a small enough age range, then it doesn't matter how cautious a small group of people are.
And Logan, thousands of years ago, when I was there in Michigan, there used to be an area of specialization called math psychology. I don't know if that still exists or if it's merged to become something else, because this approach that you're using regarding modeling seems very related to that. And I'm wondering what kind of background preparation you need to have to get into this kind of a program, for example, with regards to program and mathematical background.
I mean, so I don't, maybe Daniel might be able to speak to that as a specialization. We definitely do have faculty that that work in the area of mathematical psychology. But for a project like this, obviously there's some technical experience required to program a simulation like this. But that's kind of one of the really nice things about Michigan is that we're so collaborative. So this programming of this interface was a collaboration between myself and another graduate student in the School of Information. So actually this is a cross-disciplinary project. I myself have some programming experience because I actually did not go to graduate school directly out of my undergrad. I decided to take some time off and go into industry for a little while, and I worked in a data science related job and kind of learned programming through my work. But I wouldn't say that it's required to enter a program like this, but I mean, of course, it's useful, and it's definitely skills that you can learn while you're here as well.
Yeah, just a note on that. I think that the ability to program, do computer programs, is really helpful as a graduate student and beyond, because all the experiments we code. So you can use canned kind of packages, software packages for putting those together, but you have so much more flexibility when you can program yourself and make the experiments do exactly what you want. We do have faculty who specialize and even tracks that are aimed at things like computational modeling. So many of our faculty do computational modeling of one sort or another, both within and outside our department. So these are all very helpful skills that, as Logan said, you can obtain after you get to graduate school. But I know that there are computer programming classes, for example, available in undergraduate, and it never hurts to get started early.
Thank you, Dan. I'd like to welcome Stephen Collins that just joined us, another UTEP student.
Welcome.
Yes, all right. Welcome to everyone who just joined. And so now we're going to be moving on to our last graduate student who is going to be presenting their research. So I'd like to welcome Madison to the stage, and she will be presenting on scientific reasoning. All right, take it away, Madison.
Thank you, Natasha. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So my presentation actually ties in perfectly with what Logan just presented, so that's great. So I'm going to be talking about the effects of data visualization on scientific reasoning processes. So what is scientific reasoning? This is the process of reasoning about scientific evidence that's usually reported through some kind of media communication. So in order to reason about science, one has to understand how to interpret scientific results, understand simple statistics and research methods. And this is a really important skill when information and both misinformation are widely available right now on the internet. So one facet of my research is studying the persuasive power of data visualizations. So do graphs persuade people to think certain things? So there's this research on seductive details, which are arbitrary pieces of information that are added to media communications that can influence scientific reasoning. So these could be things like neuroscience images, math equations, chemical equations, or in my case, graphs. So all these different elements have this kind of persuasive value that makes somebody think something is scientific, when really it's just adding a picture into a news article. So like I said, graphs have been shown to have this kind of persuasive element. So these researchers, they conducted a study and they found that participants who were shown bar graphs rated the effectiveness of a medication as higher in comparison to people who weren't shown a graph. So the media thought this finding was really cool. They picked it up and lots of different places publicized this. So, you know, here's proof that graphs are the key to convincing people of your argument. So I wanted to study in what context do we see this persuasive power of graphs? Is it only in certain contexts? Is it only certain kind of graphs? And you'll see a lot of times politicians, for example, they'll hold up graphs to kind of prove a point. And even though you can't read the axes on the graph, you can't really see the information. Just the idea of them having a graph makes what they're saying seem more scientific. And this makes sense because graphs align with our representation of what science is. And prior researchers have found that graphs are associated with hard sciences instead of soft sciences like social sciences. To the reader, that's what they think at least. And then also people prefer reductive or concrete explanations of information, and graphs kind of provide a visualization. So how do I study this? I create these news articles with made-up studies. And so for this one, it was research shows link between attending religious service and happiness. And then I'll randomly assign participants to view this article either with or without a graph. And then I'll ask them questions about the article. So in this case, I asked them, how effective do you think church is on improving happiness? Or does attending church really lead to increased happiness? So I found in this research that it's actually very difficult to replicate this finding. It seems that the influence of graphs is very context specific and it depends on the prior attitude of the person. So somebody who has a neutral attitude on whether going to church leads to happiness is more likely to be persuaded by the presence of graphs than somebody who has a strong prior belief, which aligns with prior research. Another facet of my work on data visualizations and scientific reasoning is in the context of COVID as well. So I'm also part of a research team, and we've been studying how visualizations affect scientific reasoning in the context of COVID. So we were interested in the difference between showing people tables versus graphs of data. So will people be more accurate at forecasting the number of future COVID-19 cases if we show them a graph or a table of case data, where forecasting just means predicting future numbers? So again, I created these news articles and participants were randomly assigned to see the data either as a table or as one of these exponential curves. And we asked them to predict the number of COVID cases they expected 3, 6, and 9 days after this article was written. So we ended up finding that tables actually consistently led to more accurate forecasts of the number of future cases. So you'll see this black line right here represents the true number of cases that were observed on those days. The blue line represents the table and the red line represents graphs. So consistently you see that the blue line is closer to the black line, which means that tables were more accurate. So we did this at the beginning of the pandemic, and then we waited a couple of weeks and we ran the study again, which is what this second graph is. And in both studies, we found that tables were more accurate. And this finding has important implications for real life because we also found that misestimation of future growth was correlated with social distancing behaviors. So the more people misestimated, the less likely they were to actually practice safe social distancing behaviors. And that is all that I have.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you to all three of our graduate presenters, as well as the two, Dr. Vargas and Dr. Weissman. So now, does anyone have any questions for any of the presenters in this session? We have about maybe 2 minutes, and then we'll do a quick poll. And you can just turn on your audio and ask it.
I was a bit a little bit confused. I guess it's my lack of knowledge in the motor. So for Quinn, I had a question of what was the purpose exactly of your research that you were doing? I don't think I quite got it.
Oh, so again, we were trying to sort of explain the decreased univariate activity in the two different brain regions, the frontal area and the motor area. And specifically, their role in motor learning at different stages. So at least looking at the preliminary data, we can say that maybe motor area has more importance as the skill is more trained and less so at the beginning, and vice versa for the frontal area.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I wasn't really aware of what like TMS was, that stimulation that you were using. So like that was like a new technique.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
It's actually as the other like Dr. Wiseman and Dr. Vargas have said at the beginning, we do have a lot of facility with such equipments at the University of Michigan. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank
We
you.
have a couple of questions for you. In motor learning, there seems to be a large involvement of activity from frontal lobe cortex. And as the behavior becomes habitual, the activation tends to be more brainstem or cerebellar. Those kinds of transitions reflect these changes that you're looking at. I like the idea of dorsolateral prefrontal cortex becoming more efficient, for example, here.
Yeah, that's actually one thing that we are also trying to look into, specifically about the involvement of the different brain networks at different stages of motor skills as well. Yes, but I don't think right now we are particularly interested in the cerebellum. So that's actually a great addition to our scope. Yes.
I'm also wondering with Madison's project, and when somebody has a fixed belief that's less malleable to change based on the graphics that's presented for them, if you can use TMS that Quinn is using to make them more flexible. So I'm thinking of ways to create more interdisciplinary collaboration within you folks, because the perspectives that these people come with are really more prefrontal cortex, right?
Yeah.
In terms of executive function. I've learned not to argue with somebody that already has set beliefs. There's nothing I'm going to do to make them change their mind, so why waste my time?
Yeah, and that's actually something my lab studies is prior beliefs and fixed beliefs that people have, and how you can kind of convince people otherwise when they do have those really strong beliefs. So for example, we had a graduate student who recently graduated, and she studied how to change the opinion of people who were against vaccinations. So that's definitely an interest of our group.
And I've seen a surge recently of people against vaccinations right now with the pandemic that's going on, and that's starting to come out again quite a bit. It's pretty scary that people have that set belief.
Yeah, and I think that just has to do with the amount of information that's available to people. Something else I've also been interested in studying is, you know, when people trust themselves more than they trust scientists, you know. So I'm not going to vaccinate my kid because I did a Google search and I don't think it's safe, versus trusting an authority figure. And I think that there are probably individual differences between those two different kind of people. And what is it that makes some people trust authority figures and other people not do so? I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna have to wrap it up in terms of questions. Thank you guys all for your wonderful questions. So I'm gonna quickly release a poll. So everyone who is here in this Zoom meeting is welcome to vote. And so it's just, in your opinion, which presentation was the best? And this is in terms of the graduate students who presented. So we have Quinn, who presented on motor learning. We have Logan, who presented on visualizations and communication. And then Madison, who presented on scientific reasoning. I'll give that about like a minute or so. And then this will give the time for the next session to go ahead and set up. And And I'm also going to send just a quick survey in the chat so that you guys can give us some feedback on this session, things that were good, things that we can improve on, so that if we do this again at like another university or come back, then we can hopefully do something, you know, make sure that it's better than this time, or like we keep the good things. Okay, so the poll has been closed, so I will now share the results. All right, so only 4 people voted. Thank you for those of you who did. So Quinn, great job. And Logan and Madison, you guys also had really amazing presentations. Thank you all for your participation, for coming. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It was tough
Yeah.
to not really good.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so I'll just give you a couple of minutes to fill out that survey that Natasha sent out, and then we'll move on.
I got a note that says I need to be allowed in to that survey.
Oh, okay. Brittany, can you get into the survey yet, or no?
No, I can. It says as well, I need permission. Oh, never mind, I can.
You can,
It worked.
okay.
It was restricted to University of Michigan emails only, so I just changed that.
Okay, now you can fill out the survey. It's a very quick survey, so if the students could just quickly do that, and then we'll move on. Okay, so let's see. What I'm gonna, so we've shown the results here. Did we show these results already? Can't remember. Okay.
Of the poll, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we did. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I guess what we can do is go over here. Okay. So I'm going to release a poll that says, "What do you think?" But option A means you're finished with the survey, and option B means you need more time. So if you're finished with the survey, answer A, and if you need more time, answer B. Okay, so you're finished. Great. So we're going to move on to session 2. And the purpose of session 2 is to discuss various opportunities that are available to get involved in research. So session 1 reviewed what kinds of career paths are available, at least 3 that are available to PhDs in academia, government, not-for-profit kinds of institutions, and industry. And now we're going to talk about, though, how you start along this path of kind of getting involved in research. And we're going to have 3 different presenters. Dr. Jordan, who is a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Psychology, and we're going to have Kathy, who is a graduate student in psychology, and we're going to have Jayla, who is an incoming graduate student in psychology, and they're going to tell us about all sorts of research, ways to get involved in research. So with that introduction, I will now hand over the floor to you all.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I see some nods. I'm Kathy. Like Daniel said, I'm a second-year PhD student at the University of Michigan in the cognition and cognitive neuroscience area. Really quick, I'm going to share my screen because we have some slides for you all. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, just like Daniel said, we're going to be talking about research programs, how to get involved in research as an undergraduate, what grad school looks like in terms of research, and also Alex is going to talk about being a postdoctoral researcher. So after you get your PhD, what does that look like? And then Jal is going to talk about what it's like being a research assistant after you get your bachelor's degree, so post-bac research programs. And so a little bit about me. I'll be talking to you today about undergraduate research and ways you can get involved. Personally, I started in labs as an undergrad the first summer after my freshman year of undergrad, and then I worked in 2 different labs. And so I found 2 labs that I really liked, and then I stayed in those labs for a long time. And I actually also have post-bac experience because I became a research assistant for one of the labs I worked in as an undergrad after I graduated, and then I went to grad school. Okay, and so where do you even begin? So you guys might have already taken classes in psychology or cognitive science or neuroscience, and so there's probably topics that you liked learning about in class. And so for example, when I took Introduction to Cognitive Psychology as a sophomore, I was like, wow, or as a freshman, sorry. I took that class and I was like, wow, I really like memory. I really like cognitive development. I really like thinking about the ways that learning and thinking change as you are little babies, and also when you're older, and like memory is changing all the time. So I wanted to work in a memory lab, and that's what I did. And so basically what you do is you think about topics you liked in class, and then you look up faculty members or labs in that specific area. So at UTEP, you guys have 5 research areas. You guys have behavioral neuroscience, bilingualism, language and cognition, health psychology, legal psychology, and social psychology. I have a friend who's super into legal psychology. So what she would probably do is go to the legal psychology page and browse around and see like what professors like are at the University of Texas, and then read about their labs. And so this image that you see here is just a screenshot from the UTEP website. And you guys have some really cool, helpful links here. And so if you want to learn about the 5 research areas, you can click through the section there. There's even an entire web page of all the labs at UTEP, which I think is incredibly helpful if you don't know what you like yet. You can kind of read about a lot of the labs there. And there's also a nice guide that's on the website about getting started in research. Okay, so once you've thought about what topics you liked in class and you found a faculty member or 2 that you liked, that you would like to work with, what I would do is I would contact that faculty. Professors, you might think, are very busy, which is true, they are, but they also love to hear from undergrads. And so I don't think you should ever feel afraid or nervous or hesitant to email a faculty member or even their lab managers. If you email the lab managers, that there might be a quicker response. But you can email the professor you want to work with and say like, hey, I'm a sophomore majoring in psychology. I really think bilingualism is super cool. I loved learning about it in your language and the mind class. Do you have any positions available for a research assistant? And it's that quick, simple email. You introduce yourself. You say, this is what I want to do. I want to work in your lab. And maybe they'll respond to me like, yes, I do have room for a research assistant. Why don't you come on in and you can meet the lab and we can talk about like what your research interests are, like what time you want to put into it, et cetera, et cetera. Or they could be like, sorry, I don't have room for research assistant this semester, but maybe next semester. So that actually happened to me. I really wanted to work in a lab. I emailed the professor and she said, hey, actually, I don't have any room for you, but there are seniors graduating next year. Why don't you come work for me then? And I was like, awesome. And so that's one of the labs I stayed in for like 2 years. And if the faculty member does not respond as I would I would go to the lab's website and find the email of the lab manager. They might be a little bit more responsive, and they also manage the day-to-day activities in lab. Okay, so that's kind of how I did this as an undergraduate. It's like the free-for-all style. There's also some formal programs that are set up for students who may want to get into research but need a little bit more help and guidance of either how to find a lab or like what to do in the lab, or like how to write these emails to professors and how to just work on general research things. And if you are more comfortable applying for a program rather than contacting professors directly, there are lots of amazing programs set up. And so several of the programs that the University of Michigan offer include SROP, the Summer Research Opportunity Program. There's also Students Tackling Advanced Research Scholars or STAR Scholars. There's also the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program, or UROP. And so 2 out of the 3 are specifically targeted for University of Michigan students, but similar programs may exist at the University of Texas, El Paso. So I would definitely reach out to the professors that you might know personally or an administrator at the school and kind of ask them whether these formal programs exist. And so I'm going to talk briefly about SROP, and then Alex later will go into more detail about it, I think. And he'll also talk about UROP and STAR, and he'll also talk about UROP. SROP is available for, I think, all students, regardless of whether you go to U of M. So, sorry, I should have waited before launching into this to see if anybody had questions about reaching out to the professors or generating emails. So I'm just going to stop. If you have any questions, I see there's some chat messages. I'll check. Oh, okay, these are just flyers. Okay, thanks, Maddie, for the flyers. But does anybody have any questions about this? Okay.
This is Eddie. I see that Alexa joined us. Thanks for showing up, Alexa. I think this is really valuable information that you'll be getting here. You folks should know that, let me see, the 3 students that are here right now are all a part of a research training program. You all are billed. I think one of you is a RISE student. And so they're already involved in research. And part of the requirements for most of these programs is that they're supposed to go out during the summer to an extramural summer research opportunity program of the same type.
Okay, great. Well, this is kismet almost, because University of Michigan has one.
I just wanted to add that this flyer in the chat window is for the STAR program, and that's available to students at UTEP also, I think. And they can register starting on Monday, and registration ends September 4th. And that provides some information about how to get involved in research. It's all online over Zoom, and how to apply to grad school and things like that. So that could be a useful resource as well.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Okay, so very briefly, the Summer Research Opportunity Program at the University of Michigan is a 10-week intensive research project here in the summer. And basically you get a financial stipend, you get $4,500 on top of room and board. So hopefully finances won't be a super big issue to participate in this program. And you also get application mentorship and research mentorship, as well as you get to meet other SROP students, presumably from all over the country, which I think is really cool. And there's also a GRE prep course, and there's like a bunch more things that come with being an SROP student. The deadlines for the upcoming summer, so next summer 2020, I don't think they have been posted yet. So I would check out, if you're interested in participating in this, I would check out the website to see the deadlines and more information on how to apply and like all the logistics and stuff. Okay, so any questions about?
I was wondering, is that program only for undergraduates, or is it available for like postbacs as well?
I don't know. I think it's only for undergrads. Does anybody else know?
I think that's right. As far as I know also.
Okay.
Are you asking because you're about to graduate?
Yes, I intend to graduate in the spring.
I see. We can check on that. I'm not sure if that's available to seniors who just graduated or not. So are you starting a post-bac right after you graduate? Is that why? Or are you just thinking about like, yeah, what was the issue about post-bacs?
I'm just interested in doing research before I start grad school in the fall. So I was just.
Okay. We can check into that. I'll look into that.
I just checked, and if you have gotten your bachelor's, then you are not eligible for SROP. However, the remainder of the session will talk about other ways that you can get involved in research, so keep your ears out for that.
Okay, thank you.
Was that you asking the question? You and I need to talk about considering going ahead and directly applying to graduate programs, because most people are hesitant to do that. And we'll talk about your strategy in the next couple of weeks, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right, so then I'm going to talk about what research experience is. It sounds like everybody is already in a program. So at UTEP, so do you guys already have like research experience and things?
Yes.
Okay, well, okay. Well, then you know that a lot of times research experience can mean like a variety of things. So you could be involved in data collection, data analysis. It depends on what kind of lab you're in. For instance, my research assistants, and I'm in a cognitive psychology lab, my research assistants primarily collect data. So they would be doing something like in the right side of the screen. If you're in a cognitive neuroscience lab doing EEG work, you might be applying electrodes, gelling people up, like you would in the left side of the screen, but really it just depends. Okay, so then I'm going to touch on research in grad school. So basically your research experience that you have as an undergrad should prepare you for research in grad school. And if you do like an honors thesis or an independent project, it will be very similar to what kind of research you would be doing in grad school. And so basically, I thought of the grad school research experience in a series of steps. And so when you first enter grad school, you will have a long conversation with your advisor who should already know what kind of research you want to do in grad school. But then it's time to talk like concrete ideas. So there's a bit of time where you're generating ideas with your advisor. And then after you guys settle down on a research question or project, you would then design and build your project in phase 2. And so that could be a variety of things. And so if you're coming to your advisor with a project that's brand new, then you would need to build it from scratch. Some people join labs where the project's already available for them and they make little tweaks. Or you're joining, for instance, like I did both. I joined a project that was already set, the data collection was already going, and I kind of just jumped in as like a co-leader. But then I also met with my advisor to talk about a research project that I would build from the ground up. And so it really depends on like what your advisor expects you to do and what you personally want to do in grad school. And the great thing about grad school is it's pretty much, it's very flexible. So you can do both, you can do one or the other. Okay, but then once you have your project designed and built, it's time to collect data. And here you would recruit a team of research assistants to help you collect data. Data collection also could look like a variety of things. You could be doing EEG data, fMRI data, or you could skip steps 1 and 2 and go directly into, you could skip steps 1, 2, and 3 and go directly into step 4, which is analyzing the data. If you're reanalyzing a data set that was collected previously, which grad students also do. And so these steps aren't like cut and dry. There's a lot of flexibility with how you do research in grad school. So then step 4 would be to analyze the data. Step 5 would be to present and hopefully publish your research projects. And then after that, you would rinse and repeat. And so I would say a lot of grad students have multiple projects kind of cooking because these steps kind of take anywhere from, you know, like a couple of days to like months to do, and maybe even years. And so it'd be really smart to have lots of projects going on, so that you could be at different steps of each project throughout your time in grad school. And so the number of projects that you do in grad school also varies. Some grad students have like one gigantic project. For instance, if you do something kind of time intensive and kind of expensive, like fMRI, you might spend your entire graduate career working on one project. Or other times in grad school, you can have a lot of smaller projects that you can collect data and write it up in like 1 year. And then you would have your master's thesis or dissertation be like a collection of those smaller projects that generally fall under a big umbrella that then moves the field forward. And so does anybody have any questions about what research is like in grad school? It's basically whatever you want it to be. No? Okay. All right. I think that's all for me. So Alex is going to talk more about like UROP, SROP, and then what it's like to be a postdoc, so after grad school. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Great, thank you. All right. So, my name is Alex Jordan. I'm an assistant research scientist in the psychology department, where I work with Patty Reuter Lawrence, which is my primary mentor, and Kathy is also in our lab. So we are also lab mates. I am originally from Romania, which is probably most famously known for its region Transylvania and the vampires. Though I have to admit that after living a good part of my life in Romania, I grew a little bit suspicious that vampires really exist. I moved to the US about 10 years ago after taking a trip to Canada, where I met my future mentor and PhD advisor, Florin Dolkos. And then we, together, we went to University of Illinois, where I did my PhD, working on emotion and emotion regulation using brain imaging, specifically functional magnetic resonance imaging. After doing my PhD, I moved to the University of Michigan as a postdoc, and I spent 4 lovely years here working with Patty on aging and cognitive training and emotion using graph theory and, of course, functional magnetic resonance imaging. And then I became an assistant research scientist, which it's a position that gives me a bit more independence, but my focus is still research, and this is what I enjoy doing most. So ever since I came to the US, I was very impressed by the amount and the level to which undergraduates get involved in research here. And at the University of Michigan, there are wonderful opportunities for this. And I wish, back in my days, there were so many opportunities in Romania as well. But things have changed a bit over the years. Nevertheless, one of the many opportunities here for undergraduate students is the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program, which has 4 branches, as you can see. So there is the traditional Europe. So this is a whole year program. It's designed for first and second year undergraduate students. Then there is the Changing Years program, which again is a year-long program designed primarily for transfer students who attend University of Michigan. Then there is the Research Scholars program that is designed for students who already had a Europe experience in their first year, and then they want to participate in more advanced research for a second year. And finally, the Summer Fellows program that Kathy has already mentioned. These are summer research opportunities for undergraduates that seek to gain a more intensive experience over the summer in a research lab. All right, so I will talk briefly about the traditional Europe, but I'll say that most of these things that I'm talking about, they apply to all these 4 branches. So the Europe program has been going on for over 30 years. Students enrolled in the Europe program, they participate in both fall and winter semesters, and it's designed for students who are seeking a first-time research experience. They work alongside a mentor who could be a faculty member, a research scientist, a postdoc, or a graduate student. So the way students get admitted into this program, they have to apply by June 1st every year, but then there are also rolling admissions for students who apply afterwards, and there is this email address where all inquiries can be sent. In order to be eligible for this program, so this is geared towards first year students, and or for students who are already attending University of Michigan with a sophomore standing. So a little bit about program goals. One, and like I said, these aspects, they refer to, or they are compatible with all 4 branches of the Europe program. So the main goal is to introduce students to various fields of research, to partner them with a research mentor. So this idea of developing a mentor-mentee relationship, which is something that I think it's a good preparation for grad school. Also, it aims to identify what are the students' future career interests, to develop skills that have real-world application and that can also be applied to the classroom, help students develop critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Importantly, though, to also develop research skills that will be useful for their future classes. And it's also a way of, say, gently stimulating and challenging students in order to adopt a more engaged scientific activity and hopefully potential career in science. So there are 4 main components for the the Europe program. The first one is a research project per se. So every student will work on a research project under the guidance of his or her mentor, and it is expected that the student will put in between 6 and 12 hours per week. And like I mentioned, the research mentor can be a faculty member or a postdoc or a graduate student. There's also a seminar that the Europe students attend, and the seminar has rotating basis of research topics, where different research topics that are specific for each field, in our case psychology, are discussed every time. And the seminars are facilitated by Europe alumni. There's also there are also skill building workshops, and these are very popular. So these are designed to help the student build various skills that are important for research, and these are on various topics, from citation management software to coding languages such as R or MATLAB or Python, data management, data visualizations, and others. And finally, the fourth component is the peer facilitation component, where every Europe student is assigned a peer facilitator who helps them find a project, develop their resume. There are also monthly meetings with the peer facilitators, and pretty much they help resolve any potential issues that may arise during the course of the program. So these are, aside from the interaction that the students have with their faculty or graduate student mentors. The program requirements are that I mentioned this before, so 6 to 12 hours per week are expected for the full academic year. There's also the requirement of engaging in the seminars, who have been traditionally held evenings, or 4 p.m. to 5:30 on Tuesdays, and these are designed to complement the research experience. The students also have to present at the annual Spring Research Symposium, and meet with the Europe Peer Facilitator once per month. So this is a photo of our lab, and here on the right, this is Jessica. She is the Europe student that I have worked with a few years ago. So she joined our lab initially as a Europe student, and she did very, very well. We have developed a very good working relationship, and that encouraged her to successfully follow that with an honors thesis in our lab. And she was so interested and so excited of the work that we are doing that after she graduated, she became our lab manager for a couple of years. So below are two of the posters that Jessica presented. I mean, the titles of these posters. We worked together on a project that involved the impact of cognitive and emotional distraction on working memory, where we studied how different distractors that were either cognitive in nature, such as shapes that are very similar to the shapes that you are supposed to keep in mind, but then are presented as distractors. So how these distracting shapes might affect your working memory in comparison with emotional pictures. And Jessica followed up on her Europe project at a more advanced level, and that became her honors thesis. So a little more about Jessica. She, like I said, she has been an extraordinary student, very curious, very interested, and I think these are the main qualities of somebody who is interested in research. Always questioning and always willing to learn, and also very dedicated. She would spend time in the lab, being involved in research, and if it was needed to put in a few extra hours, she would do that with great enthusiasm. All right, so this is kind of a nutshell about Europe and my very pleasant experience mentoring a Europe student. I'll be happy to take any questions that might be related to this aspect so far. Okay. So moving along to the summer research program. This is kind of the splash screen. It is addressed primarily to junior or senior college students that are not part of University of Michigan Ann Arbor. So, and the purpose is to increase diversity of graduate students involved in research. In terms of eligibility, so it's open to U.S. citizens, permanent residents, or non-U.S. citizens with DACA. Minimum GPA of 3 on a 4.0 scale. Students who are interested in graduate studies, and for instance, those who would plan to apply to an graduate program, but not necessarily here. Right, so as far as I read here, so I believe they need to have medical health insurance coverage. And there are also other criteria, for instance, being an underrepresented minority in a particular field. But of course, more detailed information can be obtained from the website. The program dates are from end of May to end of July, and typically the application deadline is mid-January. We expect probably this year is going to be a similar date. And I believe Kathy touched upon these benefits, so I won't go over them again. And let's see, finally, I wanted to touch base of what comes after graduate schools. I guess some of you might be interested. So one path, one option is becoming a postdoc. As a postdoc, you do mostly research, and sometimes that could be blended with a teaching position. So part of your activity could be also dedicated to teaching. That was not my case, but there are other postdocs here that have also taken a teaching aspect of their postdoc experience. But with or without a postdoc experience, you can also get more geared towards teaching as a lecturer, or also as an assistant professor at a research-intensive university, or at a liberal arts college, where in that case the focus is mainly on teaching, but there are also there's also a research commitment. There are also what are called non-tenure track faculty positions at various universities. So this typically are for a limited period of time, and they're pending on funding, pretty much as long as funding is available. You can also become a core facility scientist, or what's called a staff scientist, which is what I am now. It is a similar position with a postdoc in some aspects, but like I mentioned at the beginning, it offers more flexibility in terms of reaching out and pursuing new research avenues. In my case, so we have been working on studies of healthy aging and cognitive training, but I have also branched out in studying individuals with mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease, which I do in collaboration with the Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Other opportunities are in industry. So there you can work as a research scientist, or in marketing, product development, or if you have strong analytic skills in companies such as Facebook or Twitter, where you do lots of data mining and data analysis. Government jobs are also one outlet. This could be from the National Institute of Health to FDA or CDC. And finally, there are also other professions that probably not many graduate students necessarily think about immediately, or are things that not come to mind. But you can work for an NGO, a non-profit, or have a career in scientific writing, a scientific editor, clinical researcher, or data scientist, or any of these. All right, so this is what I had. And again, I am happy to take any questions.
I had a question.
Sure.
When you work with core facilities at universities, is there a teaching requirement to that?
So you mean when you're a staff scientist? Yeah. Right. No. So typically, if you're a staff scientist, you don't teach. But there is the option. If you want to take like an additional teaching commitment, you could do that. But typically, there is no teaching obligation as a staff scientist.
Thank you.
I have a question. This is Eddie, and
sure.
It goes back to Kathy's introduction to this session. And Alex, maybe you can join in on this, which has to do with how prepared do you have to be when you approach a potential faculty mentor. I always talk to my students about you have to make sure that you know what the research is, at least be exposed to it before you talk to them. You can't approach a faculty member and ask about being interested in the lab if you don't even know what they're doing. But even beyond that, for non-traditional students, there's a hesitancy to approach a faculty member because they're too busy, they're too important. And so What is your sense, including graduate students, of being able to approach a faculty member to ask for opportunities to become involved in research in their labs?
Right. I mean, that's a great question. So I'll say that, fortunately, nowadays, most labs, they have a web page. So starting from the web page of the lab, I think that's a great way to find out what they're doing, and how other people look who are in the lab, and how many undergraduates there are in the lab. That will also be a good indicator. So most, and about, I would say pretty much all websites, they typically have this, our research page, and there the principal investigator, they typically describe what their research is about. Also, the graduate students and the postdocs in the lab, typically they have like small blurbs saying what they do. So I would always encourage, before you get in touch with a faculty member, to get a gist of what they are doing. If you have the time, maybe also look at the list of publications, and if there's something that has a title that really interests you, you can look over it. Maybe read the abstract. That's the summary of the paper. And I think if you mention in your email that you are not only interested, but that you're interested in a specific topic, and if you add that, I was very interested by this paper that you wrote, I mean, that's probably a slam dunk, because that's something that PIs would be very impressed to see that there is a genuine interest. And I'm sure that most of the students, when they contact their faculty that they want to work with, they are genuinely interested, but it helps to get a bit out of your shell. And if I might say, I know how that feels. I mean, it's I came to the US not having English as a first language, and I had to learn how to approach people. So it's something that in time you gain, but it's also good to have the opportunities to practice this.
Thank you so much.
I had like a quick question. I'm not sure if Kathy, if I heard right, you said you did like a little bit of postbac. I was just asking, how was your experience in that?
So it was good. I would recommend, if you could find a position to be a postbac, I recommend almost every single person to take time off after you get your undergrad degree before going to grad school, because postbacking taught me a lot of lessons, which I'm sure Jayla will talk about like right now after I stop talking. But I'll just chat a little bit so she can get her slides set up. Yeah, it was awesome. I was a full-time research assistant for 2 years after I got my bachelor's degree, and it taught me a lot of lessons about time management, about the nitty-gritty of research. You don't get paid a lot of money, but I will say it's amazing experience. And it made my transition to grad school a lot easier, in my opinion.
And Kathy, if I might add, given our recent experience with Jessica, also being a lab manager could be a way of getting like a very hands-on experience of what grad school and research is about. So, if you want to I mean, for anybody who want to take a year or two off after graduating, probably being a lab manager for a while is one of the most informative experiences, because you become part of the lab, you see how a lab works, and you work together with the graduate students and the PI and the postdoc. So I think that's a very helpful way to gain experience before grad school.
Well,
Which
thank
is
you.
a great transition.
Hi everyone, it's Jayla. Alex, would you mind like to stop sharing your screen, and then I'll go ahead and share mine?
In the meantime, I see we have some students that have joined since a little while ago. Eric
So
Perez.
Jayla, if you just share, it should
Okay.
It should switch. Yeah. Okay.
I was just welcoming some students that I saw have joined us: Eric Perez, Bella Castro, Bianca Gurrola, Oscar Sandoval. I'm glad you could make it.
I'm having some trouble sharing the screen, it looks like.
If you're having trouble
Try.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say try again now. I enabled screen sharing for like everyone.
Okay.
Just to see if that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's still not doing it. But if someone else will just share the Google slide, then maybe I can just like tell them when to like press, whoever has like access, because for some reason my screen isn't sharing.
Yeah, we can probably do that.
I can do that. That's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Great.
Okay, perfect. So I'll just present from here, and then I'll just let you know when each next slide. So hi everyone, my name is Jayla. I am an incoming first year student in the CCN area here at Michigan. And today I'm just gonna talk about research after undergrad and kind of like what is a post-bac, should you do one, and like what the benefits are. So if you'll press the next slide. So what is a post-baccalaureate? So basically it's just a program or a position that's designed for recent college graduates to develop and strengthen their research skills prior to applying to graduate school. And so basically the goals of the post-bac is just to improve and acquire more research skills. It's a really great time for GRE preparation. You can get a better idea of what your research interests are. Maybe you didn't realize that, oh, I'm actually interested in something else, or actually I'm not interested in this anymore. So it's a really great time to get a better understanding of your research interests. And then also you can take additional courses that might be helpful for the application process, whether that's taking like a graduate level course, or even learning a new programming language online, things like that. Ultimately, it's just really a time period for you to like grow as a researcher and become more competitive for the application process. Within post-bacs, there are different types. There's like an official post-bac program where it's like offered by like a university, and basically like you get matched up with like a faculty member, you do a project, they have GRE preparation courses, they have you take graduate level courses. Usually what I've seen is that those tend to be only about a year long. From what I've seen, usually you do get a stipend or some sort of funding. And yeah, so there's not a lot of official post-bac programs. I think post-backing is really prevalent like for pre-med students that are looking to go to medical school. There's a lot of post-bacs for that. But in psychology, there are definitely a handful. You can also opt to do like be like a research assistant, or even like a lab manager that was mentioned earlier. I chose to, when I did my post-bac, I was a research assistant. Or you can work in industry. So basically you could be doing research, but maybe it's not like in an academic institution. I know other people have mentioned like some sort of like marketing research or like working for like maybe an internship with like Facebook or Twitter, things like that. So those are the different types of postbacks and like the purpose of it. And then I'm also going to talk about like my journey with it and like timing that with applying to graduate school. So this is my journey. So on the right side is just kind of like my timeline, and then the left side is just like pictures from along the journey. So for me, I graduated undergrad in June of 2018. And then within that same week, I actually started my postbac position. And basically I was working full-time, like normal 9 to 5, 40 hours a week job doing research, which I really appreciated because not only was I getting the research experience, but I was also like getting paid to do it. And like within like the 8 hours a day, like after you're like get off work, then you could just kind of do your own thing. So I thought that was nice. And then in October of 2018, I actually attended the University of Michigan's Diversity Recruitment Weekend, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later as well. And basically you like learn more about the graduate school application. You learn more about University of Michigan. And that's kind of where I decided like I definitely wanted to apply to Michigan. In February through June of 2019, that's when I really devoted to studying for the GRE. So I would, after work, I would go to the library and study. And then eventually I ended up taking the GRE. I did like all right on it. I didn't do that great. So that'll come up later in this timeline as well. In March of 2019, I had a chance to present like my work from my undergraduate honors thesis at my first conference. So that was a really great experience to network and meet other people in the field. In April 2018, that's when I went to another diversity weekend, but this time at the University of Virginia. And what was interesting is the faculty members that were like hosting the diversity weekend there were actually graduates of the University of Michigan. So it was a really great connection there. And then in June of 2019, because I didn't do that well on my GRE, I actually opted to take a graduate level stats course at the university that I was working at. And with that class, I, developed more stats skills and programming and things like that, but I developed another project. So that was a good experience for me as well. And then that summer in July, that's when I started like the application preparation or like process. So that's when you like kind of start listing all the schools and faculty members that you might be interested in working with. And you kind of like narrow it down like based on like location or like what's important to you. In October, I had a chance to present that second project that I developed at another conference. And I, for the class that I was doing where I developed that project, since I wrote a paper, I decided to like basically turn it into a manuscript. And in November, I was able to submit that. And then in December, I applied to graduate school. And after that, you have interviews. And then in June, this past June, I actually just ended my postbac job. And then from June to now, I've just been like getting ready to start graduate school, which starts on Monday. And the reason why I liked doing a 2-year postbac position is because that year and a half between like June of 2018 to November of 2019 is where I really grew as a researcher, or like I was able to do things that I can like put on my application that I thought would make me more competitive for graduate school. And it really lined up with like the application timeline of submitting on that December 1st deadline. So for me, I thought a 2-year postbac was important to get all the things that I wanted to get done versus if I had applied like that first time, like in December of 2018, then you really only have like the summer after you graduated to like put on your application. But that was my journey. So we can go to the next slide. I wanted to talk briefly about the University of Michigan's Diversity Recruitment Weekend. Basically, this program is for current undergraduates or recent graduates to learn more about like the grad school application process, not only at U of M, but like in general. And it's devoted for students who come from underrepresented groups. You get to go to workshops where they talk about like how to develop a personal statement, how to prepare for the GRE, how to ask for letters of recommendation. You have panel discussions with faculty members about like the research that they're doing. And you also have panel discussions with the graduate students, like how they enjoy the program. You get to meet with individual like faculty about things that research interests that you have in common. So you get a chance to potentially meet someone that you might decide to apply with. I actually did meet my advisor that I'm going to be working with in graduate school at Diversity Recruitment Weekend. And he put me in touch with another faculty member that he thought would be a great match, and I'll be working with her as well. So for me, Diversity Weekend was a really great opportunity. And you get to hear about all the different research that's going on in the different areas of the psych department. So not just like our CCN area, but you get to hear about like what is clinical doing, what is biopsych doing, what is social doing, and things like that. So I thought it was a really great program. It is still happening this year. However, it will be virtual. I think it'll be taking place October 16th and 17th of this year. The application deadline is coming up, so it's September 4th, and it is free. So if you're interested, I would definitely apply to that. And then I think the next slide. And then overall,
I just wanted to add really quickly that we just dropped a link for the Diversity Recruitment Weekend into the chat window. The deadline to apply is actually September 4th, which is coming up sometime next week. So for those of you who are interested, take a look at that link. And feel free to apply. I'd love to see you there.
Yes, and then lastly, just some benefits of postbacking. I really enjoyed it because you get a chance to refine your research interests and strengthen your skills. I also use it as a time to volunteer. So for me, I was living in Colorado, and I would volunteer with the Colorado Black Health Collaborative, where we would go to like different barbershops and salons and provide blood pressures at those different places. And for me, like in the Black community, chronic hypertension is definitely like, I think it's like the #1 silent killer. And so for me, volunteering was, really good opportunity. So if you have time to volunteer, I would do that during your postdoc. Also, it's a really great way to save money because applying to graduate school can be a little bit expensive, especially with application fees, buying GRE prep materials, paying for the GRE, submitting your transcripts, sending your GRE scores. It can all add up. So working a full-time job allowed me to save money. Also, you can continue like advising with your mentor in undergrad. I know I stayed in contact with her, and she really helped me along the way with getting ready to submit my application. And lastly, it's a really great time to prepare for the GRE. I have a link to like a list of postbac programs like that the APA has outlined that I can drop in the chat box as well. And then I think that's really all I had to say. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer?
Did you mention exactly where you went to get your postbac program?
Yeah, so actually I postbaced at the University of Colorado in the School of Medicine there. So I was in their OBGYN department. So I was doing research that isn't really related to what I will be doing in graduate school. So I think the most important thing is to just do research during your postbac, and if you can sort of tie it to what you're interested in, or say like, oh, I actually realized I do not want to do any of the research that I did during my postbac. I think that's the most important thing. But yeah, you can postbac at a hospital, inpatient, outpatient clinic, anywhere that you could do research.
Thank you.
Jala, are you from Denver? You went to the University of Denver also?
Yeah, so I went to University of Denver. Mm-hmm.
So Denver's kind of cold in its winters, and then you move to Michigan, but it's directly north of El Paso going through Albuquerque pretty much. So I just want to point out that kind of geographical nearness that you have with UT El Paso.
Awesome.
Yeah, that kind of long distance change can take place.
Yes.
Let me see how many of you there are. There's 2, 4, 6, 7 UTEP students here. I would challenge you to apply to this diversity weekend. The deadline is September 4th. Unfortunately, you can't fly over there this year, but it just happens to be that situation for us in our lifetime. But it's a tremendous experience, and it's free. It only takes your time to participate, and it is really valuable. You learn a lot, and it's just an exciting experience to go through by itself. I have a question, a more general question. Can a student apply to both the graduate program and the postback at University of Michigan? If I was to apply to both, might it risk my acceptance into the other?
What do you mean by the postback program at Michigan? Oh, I think you're muted, by the way. I can't hear you anymore.
Michigan has a postback program, doesn't it?
I'm not aware of the postback program. Does it? Maybe.
I don't think specifically, but there are a lot of like research assistant postback positions that aren't necessarily program run. That would be like lab specific, like Jayla did.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, that's right. But in general, for a student who was applying, to a postback program, say at NIH, and at the same time applying to graduate schools at University of Michigan, and just trying to figure out, where they get admitted and things, that would be fine.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so I think, let's see. Do we have, oh yes, we just dropped a survey for the students into the chat window. So I just want to give you about 3 minutes to fill out this survey on session 2 and how useful you found it. And then while you're doing that, the presenters for session 3, our final session, will be setting up their video. So just go ahead and fill that out now if you could. Okay, so I'm just going to launch a poll, and if you are finished, answer option A, and if you are still need more time, please answer option B. Okay, so we just give it another minute or two.
Okay, it looks like we have 5 responses in the form. So we are going to go on and start session 3, which is going to be applying to grad school. So first, for the students who joined after the very beginning, I am Maddie Quirk. I'm a second-year PhD student in the Cognition and Cognitive Neuroscience area of the Michigan Psych Department. And so for this session, we're going to have 3 other graduate students and 2 faculty members talk to you guys about how to build a successful grad school application. So they'll first go through some tips and important information about for before and during the application process, and then some do's and don'ts of creating a successful statement. So personal statement and academic statement. And then you'll get some faculty perspectives on the admissions process. So for this session, we have a 15-minute Q&A scheduled for the end, but we've kind of been going a little over time, but we'll have time for questions at the end specifically about this session. And then it'll also be kind of a nice time to just wrap up with any questions you guys have about the program as a whole. So each of our speakers are going to introduce themselves first with their name and some info about themselves, including their track from undergrad to grad school, which I think is kind of helpful to see the range of how people got to where we are now. So I will go ahead and hand it off first to Dr. Julie Boland.
Hi, everybody. So I'm a professor in CCN, and my specialty is in language processing.
Julie, did you go straight from undergrad to grad school?
Oh, sorry. I did, and I went straight from graduate school to a faculty position, but that was quite a while ago. So my PhD is from 1991, and it was less common at that time to do a postdoc.
I'm up next. So I'm Taraz Ali. I'm an assistant professor in the psychology department, also in the CCN area. My research looks at the interaction between motivation, what's called cognitive control, so short-term memory and attention, and motor control, so how people learn movement skills like playing a sport or playing an instrument. In terms of my path to grad school, it was a little bit circuitous. It was a little roundabout. So I thought I wanted to be pre-med, and then took some pre-med class, decided that wasn't for me. I did a little bit of psychology research in undergrad, but I actually didn't have that great of an experience in the lab that I worked in. And then after, I thought I was going to work in tech, but I ended up playing online poker for a couple of years professionally. And then and then during that time, I decided I was really into psychology and neuroscience research. So I actually spent a year in a lab during that time, volunteering. And then I decided I really wanted to go to grad school. So then I went to grad school. Then I did a postdoc, and then I started a postdoc in Michigan that transitioned to a faculty position here.
Hi everyone, I'm Selena. I am an incoming CCN student in the psychology department, and I actually grew up in Massachusetts, and so I went to the state school there in Lowell, which is about 40 minutes north of Boston, and I graduated in 2017, and then I worked for 3 years at a nonprofit organization. So I had some experience outside of academics. And I just want to reiterate what Kathy and Jayla have said about taking some time off. It was the right move for me. It's not for everyone, but we will talk more about, what is the right path and how to apply if you're interested in going right away or not.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric. I am born and raised in El Paso. I got my degree from the University of El Paso in linguistics, but I did a fair amount of research in the psychology department, so I felt like I was part of it. And I did go straight from my undergrad to my current second year graduate student position now, and I'm working alongside with Dr. Boland, language comprehension and stuff like that.
Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Grant, and I'm in my final year in the CCN graduate program. I did go straight from undergrad into grad school. As an undergrad, I kind of took a roundabout path, started off in nursing, then went to pre-med, then went to research. And I really realized that I enjoyed doing research on attention and kind of control, and that is what I study right now. So to start off, we're going to discuss a little bit about what to do before applying to grad school, what sort of things you need to keep in mind. And the biggest thing that might not be obvious at first is that when you're deciding on where to apply, you should really think about choosing professors rather than universities. And this was something that didn't really occur to me at first, because when I was an undergrad, I made a list of universities and looked at the programs, but I realized the most effective way of going about it was to create a list of researchers whose research I really enjoyed, that I would think would be great to work with, and then kind of use that as my baseline to branch off from there. And so I went from a list of about 20 researchers, then down to 10, then down to 5, etc. And I would highly recommend doing that, because that's how you're going to ensure you have a really good fit. Now, the question, how many schools to apply to? That depends on a number of factors. Personal financial feasibility. For me, I come from a low SES background. Applying to grad school is expensive, so I was a little bit worried about it. There are fee waivers if finances are a barrier, and also some universities don't even have an application fee. I realize Vanderbilt University, for example, it doesn't cost anything to apply. So that's fantastic. I would definitely check those out if you're worried about the financial impacts. Another factor is the caliber of schools that you're thinking of applying to. For me, when I was an undergrad, the caliber of the school didn't matter, but what mattered more was how much I really enjoyed the research of that particular researcher. So everyone will kind of weigh these variables differently, so it's just another thing to keep in mind. And one thing to definitely take into consideration is don't waste any energy on applying to schools if for any reason you're not sure you want to go, or you think it's not a good fit, etc. Applying to grad school can be a very time-consuming endeavor, so you want to make sure that you are focusing your resources, your time, your energy in the right direction. Now, these schools can be very selective. That's why it's so important to contact these researchers beforehand, kind of set up a potential mentor-mentee relationship, get to know that person, see what their research is about, see if you think it would be a good fit, that sort of thing. For me personally, I applied, I believe, to about 5 or 6 schools, but that number can vary from person to person. Some people will be highly selective, others can be as much as 10 or 12 schools, for instance. But of those schools, usually there's only 2 to 15 slots per year. And usually no more than 10% of students are actually selected in the final round. And I think another thing, I know for CCN, it can be pretty selective, but some areas may be more selective than others. So clinical might be more selective than CCN, or vice versa. So next slide, please. Thanks. So as I was mentioning before, make sure you email potential advisors or their lab members to get a better sense of fit. I would highly recommend reading some research articles, see what you like, what you don't like. What I found out when I was an undergrad is a lot of times I would email a bunch of people, but then realize only later that they weren't even accepting students for the upcoming year. So I wasted a lot of time doing that. So definitely reach out, see who will be looking at students for the upcoming year, whether they're accepting applications, that sort of thing, so you can use your time more effectively. And don't apply to a lab you're interested in if you don't receive any responses. As an undergrad, I sent emails to various places. Some I received a response, others I didn't. For those that I didn't receive a response, I didn't bother applying because I figured they probably weren't accepting students for the upcoming year. Yeah, and then talk to current professors and graduate students. So they are your friends, they are your network, make sure you utilize them. They've already been through this process before. They'll be able to give you tips and tricks on how to navigate this very complicated situation. I had no idea how to go about it. So my lab mate and my undergrad advisor, they were excellent sources of information, and they were really good at guiding me. Oh, okay, well, why don't you get a list together of potential researchers? Why don't you look at this program? This seems pretty aligned with what your interests are, that sort of thing. And then when you do email these potential advisors, if you think it is a good fit, make sure you speak to people in their lab. See what it's like to be a grad student in that lab. What are the different job descriptions that you may be doing? Is that something you're interested in? Are you really interested in programming? Are you not? What kind of experiments do you think you would run if you went there, etc.? just to kind of recap from all this information, make sure that you reach out, that you make a list, and that you use your time most effectively when you're applying to grad school.
Can I just insert a quick note about emailing professors?
Mm-hmm.
So definitely email professors you're interested in working with if you're planning on applying to grad school. If you don't get a response quickly, don't be too alarmed. I think some professors are slower over email. They might have even missed your email, so it's not a bad idea to follow up. We'll give a follow-up email, a week or two later, something like that, if you don't get a response. And then if you don't get a response after that, you probably should look somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree. It's worth a second try. I know in my case, if I don't respond within about 48 hours, it gets buried and I'll never find your email. So if you send me another email, you want to make sure you say, this is my second email. So that will, that will make me realize that I'd already neglected you once, and I'll be more likely to respond.
That's really critical to understand. Thank you for saying that. Yesterday was my day to catch up with 3 days worth of emails. That's all I did yesterday, so that's important.
Okay, so the application itself, the letters of recommendation are a big part of the process. And the thing that worried me the most was who to ask when I was applying. But one of the things that helped me was to kind of each letter having, or each recommender having something that they could outline about me, right? So academics, research, and work are some of the ones that you want to look at because they're one of the more important ones. For example, asking a professor who you've taken courses with, like if you take a lot of courses with Dr. Castañeda, and he knows you and you participate in class, he might be like a good option to write you a letter. But you can also ask if you're already part of a lab, you're in Dr. Sarate's lab or something like that, you can ask them to write you a letter and they will more than happily oblige to that request. And it's important to get letters from mentors because it kind of gives whoever is reviewing your, I guess your application will get to see an insight as to how you work in a lab, how you manage lab work, and so on and so forth. So it lets them know that you can actually carry this, I guess, like the challenge of working in a lab, because a lot of graduate work is basically being a research assistant. But instead of being or of assisting someone, you're doing the work for your own projects, right? So that's something they have to keep in mind, and why mentor or letters from mentors are very important. If you have a job that's related to the field, so for example, I was both a undergraduate TA and a lab manager at 2 different points in my career. So I was able to get a letter from someone who I TA'd for, and teaching is a part of graduate school. Some programs require you to do it for 2 years, maybe 1 year. So if they see that you're good at being a TA, that's a good option to list. As a lab manager as well, that will do wonders for you. Being a lab manager is one of the best things that you can do, especially as an undergrad, because it shows that you know your way around the lab, how to like work on your feet and how to like quickly figure out any problems that might occur in the lab. Another thing that you might want to keep in mind is that sometimes professors forget. You work for them for a long time. Maybe they don't remember you because you haven't taken a class with them in a year. So it's important to provide like a CV or maybe like a sample of a paper that you did in their class so that they remember like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember this, I remember that. And it also gives them like an idea of how you write, and they can say other things about you in their letter. Same goes for mentors and people that you work for. Send them your CV and then remind them of what you contributed either to their work, what you contributed to the lab, what you contributed to this project, to that project. to help them write the letter a lot faster and more efficiently. As you know, professors are very busy, especially during this time. You know, a lot of the deadlines are December 1st. So they're in the middle of the semester. Things are kind of like going here and there, here and there. So it's nice to have them kind of do the job for them in a sense, right? So that it benefits you in the end. And as it was mentioned before, be organized with the schools that you're applying to. Write down deadlines, necessary information for your recommenders. So organize links, addresses, and deadlines from each university so that your recommenders know when and where to submit their letters. And that's something that you have to provide for them. Also keep in mind that, well, forget it, that was an afterthought, but it's not important. So when to ask about these letters, I say about 2 months prior to the deadline. It gives them time to sit down and work on it. However, if they do forget, because 2 months is it's a large amount of time, it's okay to remind them. Don't be afraid of asking them like, hey, how's the letter going? It's getting closer to the deadline. How is it going? Because I know they forget. I know when I asked, I think it might have been Dr. Cooper. I think he was one of the ones that was like, who forgot to write my letter. And I was like, oh man, it's a week before and I need it now. So then I sent them an email. So it's okay to remind them. They're not, just be nice and keep them, keep them on track. So how many do you have to have? It varies from schools, from 2 to 3. I think U of M does 3, so it's good to have people who you can get letters from. You can go to the next one. Okay, so transcripts. So I know some students from UTEP have some of their education in, well, first of all, it's important to include all of the transcripts from the institutions where you completed coursework. So if you go to an early college, if you go to EPCC or a community college, if you studied abroad, you need to have the transcripts for the classes that you took in those institutions. And if those transcripts are in a different language, I know, like I was saying earlier, some of the students from UTEP have some education like UACJ. The institution has to provide a translated word for word in the same format as the original transcript. However, if the institution doesn't provide that official translation, you can get services or translation services from the Education USA offices. You can just search one and you'll be able to find one. So it's important to have all of those documents together and make sure that you have them in the right format, you have them in the right language for when you submit these forms. Universities will also have a list of degrees, documents, and other necessary things for admissions. So it's necessary to check early to make sure that you have the right document, that you have the right degree for the application. Otherwise, you're going to be wasting a lot of time doing an application for a school that you can't even apply to because you don't have the right degree or you don't have the right document. So it's nice to check early and make sure that you stay on track. Some schools require official or unofficial transcripts. The only difference is that unofficial doesn't have the seal from the same place that gives you your degree. So, keep in mind that you got to check these things early so that you can, order transcripts within time. Some of the official transcripts take about 5 to 7 days to get to you. So you have to keep in mind that if you didn't do it on time, you might miss a deadline or something like that. So again, including transcripts from study abroad or other grading institutions, they have to be standard. Or if they're not standard, you have to write it down in some sort of comment section so that those people who are reviewing your application know that it's not in the right format or you can't get it in the right format. So it's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about transcripts. If you can move on to the next slide. And then I think the thing that people fear the most is the GRE. The GRE has become more and more optional for some universities and some programs, but most still require it. You have to check the university or the program itself to see if they require the GRE. There is a psychology-specific GRE, but from the research that I've done, most universities don't require you to do it. But it's still important for you to check if that university or that program is specific to, or requires you to do the specific or the general GRE. So most universities don't have a high GRE cutoff, but committees and individuals can place more or less weight on it. I know I did terrible in my GRE, but I know that U of M is trying to get rid of it, or specifically CCN. So I didn't do well on it, but they didn't weigh it as much in my application process. Many schools do post the averages of their last cohort, but that does not mean that it's a cutoff. It just means that that's the average of that class. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that you gotta get this to move on to the next stage or to get accepted into the university. Another thing to do is to reach out to potential advisors to see how the GRE is weighted or used. So if the GRE is a do or die kind of thing, where either you meet the cutoff or you don't, or you have to meet the cutoff, and if you get anything below, you're not even looked at, right? So those are things to kind of keep in mind when you're looking at schools. The GRE is a challenging exam. It's very important to dedicate time to study to this. I only had about like a week and a half to study for it, but most of you guys will have more than that to study. Some people take half a year to study for it. Some people just take a couple months. So it's important to just dedicate time for it to study. Buy or borrow a practice book. It doesn't have to be the most recent book. I know I worked off of one that was from 2017 and 2018 when I did my GRE. So you'll be fine with an older book. Take practice tests that come with it. Kaplan and other companies offer some free practice materials and events that you can attend for the GRE. I dropped a link there for you guys for you to check it out. U of M specific, so CNN or CCN, my bad, developmental social required to take the general GRE for this year. However, there are some programs within social, like specific programs, like I forget which ones they were, but they don't require you to do the GRE, either the general or the psychology specific. So that's why it's important for you to check with the program and the university to make sure that you get the right GRE, because it is an expensive test to take. Not so much, I mean, it's not like thousands and thousands of dollars, but it is a very expensive test to take. However, ETS does have a free reduction program, which can waive 50% of the fee. However, it does work in a first come, first serve basis. So make sure that you look at the recommendation, or that you look at the requirements for you to get approved for the free reduction program, and make sure to schedule it at the right time so that you're not, scrambling to get a test done. And then research experience. I'm sure you guys have heard countless things about research in the past two sessions, because it is important. It can help you narrow down your interest in an area. Personally, I was part of a linguistics research lab, but I ended up not liking it. So then I went to psychology, and I ended up loving the two labs that I was in. And that helped me really, really narrow down what I wanted to do with my career. It also shows that you can develop and carry out studies. It can develop skills that may appeal to potential mentors. So maybe your lab codes things in R, or it codes things in C++, or whatever it may be. You might develop skills that some professors are looking for. And it can create a healthy work-school life balance. So really quickly, for the two other graduate students that are with me, how much time did you guys have to, or how much research experience did you guys have before you actually applied for grad school? Personally, in the two labs that I had about 1.5 years in them each. But I'd like to hear what you guys had.
For me, I went, the undergrad that I was in, they didn't really have a PhD program, which actually helped out in my favor. So I was able to get involved into research like the summer after my freshman year. But I didn't specifically work in labs that related to what I was interested in. I mostly worked in labs just to gain research skills in general, like data entry, cleaning. And then I think the first time that I ever worked in a lab that a cognitive neuroscience lab that I was interested in was I did a program similar to the SROP, but at a different university. And that gave me the whole experience of doing a research project from start to finish. And so it was very instrumental to me realizing that I do like research. And then after I graduated, when I worked at that nonprofit, I was able to get clinical experience as well as research to see if I liked that. And I realized that I was more on like the research side.
For me, I had about 2 years experience working in a cognitive lab. They looked at choking under pressure, which I was quite interested in. And I did my senior thesis in that lab. So that was my primary source of research experience. At the time, I was still going back between research and pre-med, so I also worked in a biomedical lab for 1 summer through an undergrad program and realized that I really enjoyed the research on choking under pressure quite a bit, and that was probably the path that I wanted to pursue.
Great, thank you. So you see the variety of, people don't find their exact match right away, but research can help you find what you don't like. So it's a great thing to do, and don't rule it out, because it's a very important part of graduate school. It's a very important part for your career if you're looking into academia. What faculty look for in research experience? So like I said before, a lot of graduate work is lab work, research work. And if you show with your experience that you can succeed in this area, it shows the mentor that you're applying to, and also the committee, that you can survive in this environment, that you can succeed, that you can carry out things. And that's going to be the biggest part of your career. So it's important that if you like research, you gotta love it. Otherwise, it's gonna be like a very tough 5 or 7 years. So you gotta love it. Faculty will also look at skills that you've gained throughout these experiences and how you've applied them or how you plan to apply them. So research provides a lot of background, a lot of richness to your application, and it also will help you understand if, hey, maybe I don't like research, maybe I don't want to do this, right? But research is great. Try it out. Ask potential mentors what skills they're looking for undergraduate students, and some will expect students to know specific skills or skill sets. I don't know if Julie or Taras expect some of their students to have like specific skills. I don't know if you guys want to have some input on that.
You want to go ahead, Julie?
Okay. I mean, having some experience in similar research, especially using some of the same tools, so I use ePrime, I use eye tracking. I love it if students have some experience with statistics or, building experiments with various tools. Those are great kinds of skills to have.
I think I'm still pretty junior faculty, so I've only actually admitted a couple of grad students, but I did value that both of them had some computer programming experience. I use functional imaging, and it kind of requires a lot of programming skill to analyze that data. So I was specifically looking for that. And also a lot of it is just like shared interests and match with my interests, and that they have research experience. They know what research is. They know what they're getting into, and evidence they've worked hard in research before, basically.
Yeah, so as you can see, some faculty do look for something specific, maybe they don't, but if you're up against someone else and you have these skills that that other person doesn't and you guys have a good match, it's definitely going to give you that advantage, right? Another thing, so we've talked about being in labs. I was in 3 different labs at 3 different times. So being in a couple of labs, that's 1 or 2, maybe 3. 3 is pushing it. I realized that 3 is a lot of work. But over a long period of time, it's a lot better it's better to be in 1 or 2 labs over a long period of time rather than being in 8 different labs for like a month each. And this is important because this is going to tie in great with what's going to happen next, is that being part of a lab for a longer period of time will help you better illustrate the things that you've experienced and learned in interviews and the personal and research statements that Selena will talk about next. Thank you.
So we've gotten an overview of like what to do before you apply, about the application itself. And so I'm going to talk about what is arguably the most important part of your application, and to just like clarify some questions that I know I personally had when I was applying and that you may have had as well. And so the first is like statement of purpose versus personal statement. Sometimes people use these interchangeably, and to be honest, I didn't even know the difference until I was actually going to apply, and I was Googling, I was like, what is the difference? And so statement of purpose, sometimes it's also referred to as the research statement. It essentially is what they say, looks forward, because it is you want to talk about what you want to do in grad school. And it's typically more formal because you're going to talk about what you have done in terms of your academic and research experience so far and how that has prepared you for what you want to do in grad school. And the statement of purpose is the document that is always required when they ask for some sort of essay. For the personal statement is more of what they say, it looks backwards because it's detailing more of who you are, and it's less formal because it's an opportunity for you to highlight other aspects of yourself outside of academics and research, in terms of your journey to where you are and how you got there and your motivations behind why you want to go to grad school. It's required for some it's optional, and then in my experience, there was some applications I applied to that it wasn't available at all. And then I will talk a little bit later about how to address that if you do have some things that you want to talk about in your personal statement where it's not available for you to do. So I know this looks really overwhelming, but I just wanted to provide an example of what a successful SOP looks like. This is actually submitted anonymously from one of our CCN students in the area. And the biggest thing to know about SOP is that there are, in my opinion, 3 main parts to it, and it's your research interests and career goals, it's your academic and research experience, and then how you fit with the program that you're applying to. And so here in the blue is a really nice overview of how this applicant talks about their research interests and career goals. And so, in this yellow here, it talks about specific interests in understanding cognitive development, and then goes into detail that it's especially in attention and attention-related disorders. And then in the blue talks about what they want to do in grad school. And then also in the yellow here talks about what they want to do after grad school, like how going to grad school will lead to the bigger picture. In the green here, this person has extensive research and academic experience, and so it's why it's taking up most of the SOP. But some of the things I am highlighting is that you want to, show, not tell. So you don't want to simply list all of the things that you have done because that will be present in your CV. Instead, you can talk, like in this block here, talks about this senior thesis that the person did, and then talks about what they learned from it and what skills they gained from it. And so I think that is valuable in showing a deeper understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it and the importance of it. Let's see what else. And then in the yellow here, this person talks about their fit with the program. Specifically, they state which professors they want to work with, which is really great because it shows that you have done research into how specifically which labs you want to work with. I know that I've found in my experience that for more psychology related programs, you actually apply to someone's lab, where if you're going into more neuroscience, you tend to do rotations. And so it's very dependent on the program. So you should look into whether or not you're actually applying to a specific lab or not. But either way, mentioning the professors that you want to work with is important because it shows how your research interest aligns with the people who are there. And it's also great to have more than one, because more than one professor that you're interested in working with, because say you go to the interview stage and then you realize that, you know, someone that's like second or third on your list is actually doing research in the direction of where you want to go. And so having that backup option is helpful. And then another thing that this person does really well with the Fit the Program is that they also talk about not only what the program would do for them, but also what they can do for the program, because it's a relationship between, you know, that you're building between what you will provide as well. So then I also wanted to provide an example of what you shouldn't do in your SOP. So I Googled.
Can I just add one
yes,
point on that very excellent point you made there about stating how you'll add to the program? I think that's really important. Oftentimes we think when we apply to schools that if we're the best student and we have A's, we're always going to get in or something. But when you apply to graduate school, it's useful to think about it also as a kind of job application. So when you're applying to work in somebody's lab, as I think Eric mentioned before, they really want to see that you have experience so that you can do the work. And so indicating in your application exactly what you're going to bring to the program or to your mentors, what skills you have that would make you useful for research, can also be a really important part of the application. So I just wanted to interject that because I thought that was just a really important point. So.
No, thank you for that. So this is not submitted from anyone that we know. I just Googled and this was the first thing that came up. So in the yellow here, this person starts off with a quote, like, don't do that. It's avoid cliches, you know. Even if there is a quote that, you know, really relates to how your work ethic, just don't put it in. This person specifically writes out statement of purpose. You don't need to do that. Typically what you can do instead is in the header, you can put like your name, the program that you're applying to, the university, and also look at directions really well, because I know that for University of Michigan, they ask you to put your UMID. So another thing is don't put any identifying information. This person, it looks like their social security. Don't put that. Don't put your birthday. Don't put your age. You know, that will be in your application. This should not identify you. You don't want any security breaches. Another thing that this person does in the green here throughout is that they talk it's like too personal. They talk about their aunt many times. Don't do that. And then here earlier when I was talking about, you know, where you want to show rather than just tell, that what this person does in all the yellow is they just like list everything that they have done. There's no substance to that. And it is very dense to read and it's very monotonous and it just takes up space and it's very clunky. What else? And then in the blue here, this person points out that they're applying because the professor suggested that they should apply. I think you want to show that you have more intrinsic motivations behind why you want to do grad school. You know, it shouldn't just be the next thing, or like, you know, that someone told you that, even though that may be how you found out, you want to show that you thought very, very deeply about this, because it is a commitment, you know, like 4, 5 to like 6 or 7 years. And so, and it is hard. And so you want to make sure that you convey that you have thought about this and that you're very, very serious about this. And then some other things in the gray is that just proofread a lot because of the spellings, typos, just know the difference between different prepositions and all of that. And so now I'm going to talk about an example of a personal statement. And as you can see already from the start that this is shorter in length, typically because it is less formal and it kind of is more of like in my opinion, like a narrative in terms of why you are, who you are, like, and where you are. And so in this blue box here, I highlighted it because it talks about, more of a personal motivations behind why this person is interested in linguistics and their research trajectory. And the personal statement is an opportunity for you to talk more about the personal connections behind the motivations for pursuing a PhD. You can mention like social, cultural, familial, educational, other important things that you view shapes your experiences. Like I know in mine, I am a first generation college student, so I talked about that a lot because it's definitely shaped my experience of like, being the first one to like navigate academia and what that is like. And that is very important to me because I know that in grad school, I want to also mentor other first generation college students. And so that's what I talked about in mine. And so just to wrap up, this are some other tips and resources for writing your personal statement versus your statement of purposes. Start drafting as soon as possible. Know that you're going to go through many drafts, and that's okay because the more drafts you go through, the stronger it'll be, and it'll just help you be more cohesive in your thoughts. Ask as many people as you can to read it over. It's always nice to have a fresh pair of eyes to, catch those typos. Also, like if you are deep in the weeds and someone reading it from an outside perspective can have caught something or like not clearly understood what you're saying. It's great for them to see that. You should, at least for your statement of purpose, write for each program. The part that you can keep the same in most of your statement of purpose is when you talk about your academic and research experience so far. But typically when you talk about your fit for the program, that should be catered to each one so that it is difficult that, you can't just write one and that's like the one that you can submit to all. And then also be aware of word limits. I don't think University of Michigan has a word limit for their academic statement of purpose. There is one for the personal statement, but I did encounter in my applications that, I wrote this like 2-page long statement of purpose and then I had to cut it down to 500 words for some applications, and that was hard. And then what should you do if there isn't a personal statement option? For me, what I did in some was I tried to incorporate some of those elements into the statement of purpose. Like when I remember one, I was talking about the fit for the program because I appreciated like the different resources they had. And I mentioned the reason I appreciated that was because I was a first generation college student. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, another avenue of what to do is you can ask your recommendation letter writers to address anything that you aren't comfortable sharing in the statement of purpose if you want to keep it more separate. And yeah, and then as a general last point, it can be stressful because this seems to be weighted a lot, but it is a great opportunity to reflect and really put your goals into perspective and the motivations behind why you are pursuing grad school. And I have 2 links here about resources, one from University of Michigan and one from an outside source that I use to draft these different statements.
Both of those links were just put into the chat, just in case you guys want to save them. That second one is a really good one.
Matt, are you controlling this one?
I'm not. Selena has it.
Selena, do you want to just advance all those animations all the way through? Just, I think there should be, there you go. So Julie and I are going to kind of talk about what happens after you send in that application and what the process is for both how you're selected maybe to get an interview and also like just moving forward, how the whole process from application all the way to acceptance. So when you start out, you send in your application. The deadlines for those do vary. They're always in the fall, but different schools have different specific deadlines. And like Selena talked about, the things they require could be slightly different. So once you send those in, usually it takes a little bit of time for the departments to get all the applications together, but the faculty, the professors, usually by December or so, get to see all the applications. And for almost every program, there's going to be what's called an admissions committee, which is made up usually of faculty and often students. So this is just some subset of the professors who are going to be looking through all the applications and trying to select out the people they think are really promising. If you're applying for psychology, at least, you're almost certainly going to be applying to a particular person's lab. So the principal investigator of that lab, the professor of that lab will probably be looking at people they think are maybe a good fit for them and tell the admissions committee that, flag a person, for example. So the admissions committee, I've served on it, I think 3 times at this point. We're going to go into in the next slide what exactly we're looking for in those applications in a little bit more detail. So the admission committee meets several times. We read all the applications. And then what we do is we make a short list. So this short list is the people we think are particularly promising. And these are the people that we are going to invite to visit us on campus. So different programs and different schools have different ways they use that short list. In the University of Michigan Psychology Department, even different areas have kind of a different ways that they use this. For some programs and schools, it'll be an interview shortlist. So these are the people they want to interview, and they're going to select admits from that pool of applicants. Other programs and schools, everybody on that shortlist is already admitted, basically. So it's kind of a fast track to getting into that school. For the CCN area in psychology, we have an interview. So we typically invite roughly double the amount of people who we're going to take to come in for an in-person interview. So every school has an interview or recruitment weekend in typically February or March, where they invite people on the short list to come out to visit campus, to talk with faculty, to see presentations. And the interview and recruitment weekends they're kind of interviews both ways. So if you get invited to come to one of these, you're also kind of interviewing the people there to see if it's a good match for you. And they're usually, I know students often are very nervous about these, but they're almost always pretty laid back. It's usually you're just having a conversation. You meet with a whole bunch of people. Everybody's very excited. They just want to learn about you. For programs and schools that are doing interviews, it's not like we're weighing people against each other necessarily. We're just trying to get a better sense of who everybody is. So you should, if you get to this stage, you should try to have fun. I'm sure the grad students can tell you, hopefully they all had fun on their interviews and recruitment weekends. And then after that interview recruitment weekend, for those schools who are doing interviews, we usually try to turn around pretty quickly. So usually in March, you'll know if you have an offer or not. And then there's a kind of national deadline for everybody to make their to accept the offers by April 15th. Usually we try to reach out to students who we've given offers to ahead of time, but technically I suppose everybody has till like April 15th to say, yes, I'm coming to grad school, hopefully at the University of Michigan, Julie, do you have anything to add about recruitment?
I was just going to say I don't know if the interviews are going to be in person or virtual this year. They might end up being virtual. But either way, every year there are always students who We want to interview who have some sort of conflict, like they've already accepted to go to another school's weekend at the same time. And I just want to urge you to like do some soul searching about which program you think you want to go to more, because if you don't participate in the recruitment weekend, you're really at a disadvantage if it's an interview program. And so you really want to make sure that you're choosing the school you want most. And even though you may feel bad about if you've already agreed to go somewhere else, if that's not your first choice, if you'd rather come to Michigan or wherever the other school is, you really should turn them down, even if you've already said yes. So that's my bit of advice. These interviews are really important, and it's not that, like Taraz said, it's not that it's like a really stressful time, but we want to get to know you, and we can't get to know you if you don't come.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it's really important for students to wait until they have all of their acceptances in order, investigate what the opportunities are in each of them, and if there's opportunities to visit the campus, absolutely to do that. I made that mistake, Julie. I said yes to the very first one that accepted me because I was told I was not going to get into anything. I ended up getting accepted to the 6 schools that I applied to.
That's great. Yeah, it's a good example.
Can I make a point about conflicting interviews?
Yes.
I had that experience where 3 of my interviews conflicted on the same weekend, but what happened for the other 2 schools was that they created like a separate interview for me, so it was more one-on-one. It's a different experience than, like, you know, experiencing the excitement of seeing everyone on campus at the same time, but just know that just because you have conflicting interviews doesn't mean that you won't be able to still have some sort of interview experience.
Okay, I'll start on this slide if that's okay, Taraz. So what are faculty looking for? Well, we want relevant coursework. So if you're applying to psychology programs, we often see that people have majored in psychology. That isn't necessarily the case. Maybe they've majored in something else, but hopefully they've at least taken some psychology courses or show some evidence that they know that they've learned enough about the field to know that that's what they want to do. Even more so, like in the cognitive program, we want to see that people have taken cognitive courses in cognitive psychology. In the social program, they want to see evidence that you've taken social courses. So the more courses you've taken in that specialty, or at least if you've taken some and done well in them, then that's evidence that you sort of know what you're getting in. We like to see good grades. We don't necessarily need to see good grades across the board, but at least we want to know that you can succeed in things that are going to be important. So courses that are really related to what you want to do. Seeing good grades in quantitative courses like statistics is always a real strength. And anyway, that's basically all you need to know about transcripts. I'd say the transcript is certainly relevant. It's not to me the most important piece of the package, though. Research experience is, to me, very important, and it also is related to the item in the lower right corner with the blue box around it, that you have a good match with your mentor's interests. So especially if you have research experience in your area of expertise, or you have research experience that has given you skills that are relevant to what you want to study, that's really great. If you haven't had any research experience, it's kind of like Eric said, you know, well, maybe you should find out if you like research first, because graduate school is a lot of research. So a post-bac kind of research appointment is a really good option if you haven't had a chance to get involved in research as an undergraduate. Letters of recommendation. Generally, like across the board, these are good. So what you really want are walks on water kinds of letters. You want to develop relationships with professors so that they have been really impressed by you, either because you are very insightful during class or because you work really hard in the lab, whatever, but you want to be revealing your best qualities to professors and remembering who it is that knows you have these great qualities to write you letters. I think it was Eric said that different schools require different numbers of letters, but if you know you've got 3 great letters and a school only requires 2, I would send them all 3, because I read everything that's in the packet if there's a student that I'm interested in. And letters of recommendation are pretty important, I would say, especially if they're glowing. But the most important thing is that you match with your mentor's research interests, because people get matched up with particular labs. There has to be a good fit there. And Selena mentioned that it's good in your statement of purpose to mention more than one person. That's because each of those people that you mentioned are potential advocates for you at admissions time. So they're potential people who want you to work with them. And if multiple people want you to work with them, that's a real asset for you. Don't write people's names down that aren't plausible. So, if someone writes my name down as someone who they would be likely to work with, and they're not interested in anything that I'm working on, then I'm going to dismiss them out of hand, right? So you got to do your homework, make sure that there's a real genuine potential match there, and that you've expressed in your statement of purpose why you think this is a good match. And Selena said that the statements of purpose were really important, and that's why, because it's so relevant to this issue of match, that's the place where you can make the case that these 2 or 3 professors at the target university would be really great to work with for you to reach your goals, and also that you would be able to benefit their research programs because you're bringing relevant skills to them.
I just wanted to add a couple points on that slide, if I could, actually. So if you don't have any research experience, I really wouldn't apply to grad school. It's highly unlikely that you're going to get accepted without showing some evidence that you have some research experience. So it's going to be a waste of time and money, I think, if you have never been in a lab, or it could even be, if you do decide to do a postbac or do something else, if you're doing research in industry at a company, that's fine, but you have to show some evidence that you've done this kind of work, because like everybody's been saying, it's a 5-year commitment. And the fact, if I'm reviewing an application and someone hasn't done any research, I just think to myself, okay, they won't, I don't know if they're going to like it. They don't know if they're going to like it. So I'm not even going to bother. And then in terms of letters of recommendation, I think I'm just going to echo points that people have made, but it's really important that somebody that knows you well. So I teach a large lecture course that has 300 students in it. And students often come to me asking for letters of recommendation. And they could be, A+ students, but if I've never really spoken with them, their letter's it's going to look bad, because it's going to say, oh, this person was in my class, they got an A, this is how my class is, but I don't know anything about them to say why they'd be good fit for grad school. I just know that they got a good grade. And you got a good grade and it's on your transcript, so I can't provide any information, and it actually reads like a bad letter recommendation. So I think it's probably even better to have a letter of recommendation from someone who knows you well, who maybe isn't not even in a research contest potentially, than someone just from a class like me. So when I was applying to grad school, I had I worked as a resident assistant in a dorm, and there's a faculty member who was my boss, basically, who was my advisor for that. But see, he could speak to certain skills that I had as a professor, and how I was hardworking and dependable and things like this that just a professor from a large lecture course wouldn't be able to speak to, right? So I think that was actually a stronger letter than big lecture professor. So choose those carefully, because they do matter quite a bit.
even in the big lecture class, I think you have a chance if you go to that professor's office hours and you have some one-on-one time with the professor so you get to know them. So, if you're kind of stuck and you need another letter writer, start going to those office hours. Go to office hours of multiple classes and see who you connect with.
100%.
Students ask GSIs or TAs for letters of rec sometimes also. So if you have a good relationship with TAs in your classes, that you're going to their office hours more often and they know you very personally and your work ethic, then they can speak to that a lot better than like the large lecture instructor.
And oftentimes we co-sign those letters with the GSI. So it's from both the professor and the GSI or the TA.
I just wanted to add one other point to follow up on Dr. Boland's sort of discussion of fit of the applicant, which is very important to the laboratory that they're applying to. And I think a really good way to discover that fit is to try to email that faculty member maybe the summer before and see if you can Skype with them or FaceTime with them or somehow have a Zoom chat with them like we are now, because that can be a really good way to hear more about what they're interested in and for you to kind of also say what you're interested in. And for that, just like we talked about before, when you're searching for labs to work in at UTEP and things like that by looking at websites, it can really help to read like a paper of that faculty member so that you know more about their research and maybe write down a few questions that interested you or questions to ask that faculty member so that they see that you're really interested in their work. And that'll help them also, based on your questions, to see, well, how would you fit in their lab and things like that. So sometimes doing your homework is good, but in addition, you can also actually try to talk to the faculty member and get more feedback on how good a fit that is.
You could actually advance all of these again. I should have taken these animations out since we're not. So this is more about the recruitment visit or the interview weekend. They're the same process, I think. It's just the if it's interview weekend, there's going to be more people than people who are accepted. But generally, it's usually more than a day, but it's usually a couple days, maybe 2 to 3 days. And how those go is that you're going to get a lot of presentations from the department and from the programs that you're interviewing with. So they're going to tell you about the program, tell you about all the kinds of research that go on there. They're probably going to show off all the facilities and show you how awesome they are. And you'll get to meet both grad students and faculty and staff who work at these places. And it's just a lot of conversations, conversations over lunch. You're going to have individual meetings with faculty. So the faculty who are interviewing or who are interested in recruiting are often in their office most of the day, talking one-on-one with potential applicants. And it's usually just trying to get to know the people who are interviewing, what their research background is, if they would really be a good fit for the kinds of research that we do. And it's just a place to show that you're excited and interested in the work, honestly. So I think there's various schools of thought on this one, but I think Julie and I think probably Daniel are in agreement that you don't need to dress up like it's a wedding. Business casual or something like that's fine. Make sure to check the weather. I made this mistake of going, so I was born and raised in Southern California, and I didn't have winter clothes. I was in California my whole life. And on a lot of my interviews that were in, I think it was in Chicago, and there's a snowstorm, but I just didn't have, one, I didn't check, and two, I didn't have clothes for that. So make sure you check so you don't freeze on your interviews. I don't think there's anything else about clothing really.
Well, just as a reminder on the interview, one thing to remember is that even though you don't have to dress like it's a wedding and you can be business casual, I think that's fine. But also do remember that you should be on maybe your best behavior, and also that even if you're not wearing your best clothes, and also you should remember that even if the faculty members aren't around, that they're going to ask the graduate students that are already admitted in the program what they thought about you. And so if you do things or say things that the graduate students who are already in the program find might not make you a good fit for some reason, then they will tell that information to the faculty members. And so just remember that. I think it's fine to ask existing graduate students, what do you think of the program? How is it going? That's all great, and finding out like what it's like to be a grad student in the program. But staying up, I don't know, staying out late and getting intoxicated or something like that, or, you know, I don't know, you can just imagine various behaviors that might not reflect well upon you. And you want to try to avoid those sorts of things. And just remember that even when the faculty aren't around, they're going to learn whatever happens. So you want to really show your professional self at all times.
And honestly, even if we don't ask the grad students, often if there's a problem, they'll come and tell us independently too. So like, just be on your best behavior. So the other things that you should do when you go on these kinds of recruitment visits or interviews is, I really want to stress that you're also interviewing these programs. So you should be asking a lot of questions and making sure it's somewhere that you actually want to be, and that you would feel comfortable there. And this, honestly, you can ask the grad students a lot. You can ask the faculty a lot of questions too about their research, but I think an underrated thing to do, I think, is to ask the grad students how their experience is, because they often will be more honest, and they'll also know more than the faculty will about how it is to be a student in that program. And I would urge you, if you get to the stage, to take notes from there, especially if you have a few interviews. It can be hard to kind of keep track of which place is which. So just having a notepad, or you can even take notes on your phone during the break or something like that. Just write down things that you liked, you didn't like, red flags, just to kind of have some record to yourself that you can refer back to. Maybe you have follow-up questions you want to ask later, or, you know, when people are giving presentations at the beginning of the day, you might say, oh, that research sounded cool. I'm going to write that down so I can ask that professor that question about that work that I just saw if I meet with them one-on-one or over dinner or something like that. And what we're really trying to learn is just, are you a good fit? If you've made it all the way to the interview stage, the recruitment stage, we think you're great. You know, it's been mentioned before, we only accept maybe around 10% of the applicants, if not a little bit less. So you are already like given the stamp of approval that you are awesome on paper, and we just want to get to know you and see if we would work well in our labs, basically. So you should be prepared to talk about your research and your interests and how your prior research kind of fits in with the work that's going on there. And we will, as Daniel said, we will, you know, ask the grad students and poll the grad students about what they think. And so all the faculty afterward are going to submit who they think, if it's for interview weekend and not just recruitment, they're going to say who they think are the best fits, and we'll go back and forth with each other about who would be the best to admit and who would work the best in our program.
I always ask every prospective student I talk to tell me about the research that they did as an undergraduate. And I find that some students can really describe their research in an articulate, insightful way, and other students stumble around and can't really say anything very coherent about it. So that's something you might practice at home. That's a question that you're likely to get asked. I also ask people questions like, you know, what's important to you in choosing a graduate school? It helps me get a sense of whether or not we would be a good fit or not. And there's always a point at which I say to students, well, what questions do you have for me? And it's good to have a question or two in mind. And even if you ask the same question to multiple people, we're not going to know. So you don't have to have a unique question for every person you talk to, but have some questions in mind.
And if you find yourself stuck in those interviews, just ask somebody about the research they do. We love to talk about our own work. So, you know, ask us about the latest things that, you know, I think a question that I used a lot when I was in interviews, and I think works well on me when people ask me, is what's the work that you're doing now that you know, maybe isn't on your website or you haven't published yet that you're really excited by, you know? So one thing to keep in mind is that the publication, there's a pretty big lag between the papers when they get published and the work that's actually going on currently. It can take, you know, over a year to get something published that's already finished. So I think that's your opportunity to see what kind of research is actually going on at the moment, what you might be involved in when you get there.
Yeah, I want to hop
think
on.
I was just going to say, I think an important thing from a student's perspective about these recruitment weekends is that they seem really scary going into them, especially if you have your first one. That first interview weekend is like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm doing. But most students are often surprised after that first few interviews with a faculty member at how casual the conversation feels. It is just a conversation, usually 30 minutes, and you guys are just talking about your research interests that more often than not should align up with the professor's research interests, and then just kind of chatting, which you come out a little bit more at ease than going into it for sure.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback off of what Taraz was saying, where one question you should be asking in all of your interviews is, what are the current projects you're working on? Because some faculty will have a lot of different projects that they're working on, or like they have like a really broad topic that they're interested in, but the way that they approach it is from multiple different perspectives. And so if they've moved on from one perspective and that's the one that you were interested in, that's really important for you to know if that's what you were there to want to do. And so knowing where they're going and also what their future projects are can be really helpful, because that's what you're going to be involved in. And to some extent, you are going in with your own ideas and with your own projects. But if that doesn't match with what the faculty's trajectory is, then that's maybe not a lab that you want to work in. So just keep that in mind. Both ask about like, what projects are you working on now? And what are your future projects? What's the future direction of your lab?
Great. So we went a little over time here, but we still want to give you guys the opportunity to ask any questions that might be lingering about this session or the previous two, if you were here for those. So feel free to just like throw your mics on if you have questions.
I have a question for Eric. Eric, since you're from El Paso, and you made a big move to Michigan like I did back in, I don't remember when, in 1980. You know, the psychology department in Michigan has over 150 faculty.
Mm-hmm.
I went into the psychobiology area at that time. They had 20 faculty. That's like 5 more than we had in the department here at psychology. The number hasn't changed here at UTEP pretty much, right? We have about just under 20 faculty. So it's a huge institution.
It is.
And it's anxiety provoking to go to such a huge institution from such a small school like UTEP. But you have a good fit with your mentor, Dr. Boland.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you've been there for a little while, what's your sense of preparedness? Because I know if you're like me, you were scared about whether I'm good enough, whether I'm well prepared.
Yeah, definitely that sense of like being an imposter, like I don't belong here because, I didn't have a psychology degree. I came from linguistics. But being part of Dr. Ivanova's lab, Dr. Francis's lab, those two labs really prepared me for my graduate work. As in terms of classes, I didn't have a big statistics background, and that was like my biggest fear, was not meeting that quota or, getting over that line. But I found that there's a lot of resources here that prepare you for something that you might be scared of. Not taking stats courses is a big deal. And the reason why it's not as scary to come to a big university as UMich is because they have a lot of resources that you can take advantage of, and they have a lot of resources to help you move along and help you grow as a student, as a graduate student, and as a researcher. So it is a big move, but it can be done with the resources that the University of Michigan offers.
And with the background that you collected from UT El Paso.
Yeah, definitely. So, the faculty amount may be small there, but their quality every single one of them. I appreciate, Dr. Bangert. I appreciated Dr. Ivanova, Dr. Francis. They're great faculty at UTEP, and they will prepare you for what's to come.
I just wanted to thank everyone who talked because you guys answered a lot of my questions, like Selena when she gave me an example of a personal statement, what to do or not to do, because that's what I'm going to be working on for these couple of months or weeks before applying. So that really helped me and guide me what I'm gonna have to write for my own and everyone else's. I really appreciate your time for talking to all of us and just sharing your advice to us.
Thanks for that. We really appreciate you guys coming. Hope that we were helpful.
Looked like Oscar may have had a question.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to get more of an insight as to picking a program, or should I be looking for a mentor specifically? I wonder your guys' opinion on that.
I think a mentor. I mean, I think the school itself doesn't matter as much as the kind of work that you want to do. And that's going to go for psychology or neuroscience. You want to find somewhere that in some lab that does the kind of ask the questions you want to ask and uses the methods you want to use. So, it's not a bad idea to start with, big schools that you want to apply to, but you should be looking at the specific factor there and make sure that there's somebody there that you really want to work with. So whether that be, so I'll use myself as an example. So when I was applying to grad school, I knew I wanted to do attention and memory and working memory. So I looked at the PIs, the professors whose work that I like. I was like, okay, well, whose lab did this come out of? And I looked, and I Googled them and looked at their labs. And then when I'm at their labs, like, oh, there's this other person who's at the same university who does something kind of similar. Let me look at them. So you're kind of like browsing through people rather than schools, if that makes any sense.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Julie.
Can I jump in? So I'm not sure what Oscar meant about programs, but one secret about a big school like University of Michigan is that each of our sub-programs, like social, developmental, cognitive, they do their own admissions. And so if someone like me who works on language, there are people who work on language in developmental also. And so sometimes people will apply and they say, I want to work with either Julie Boland or Yulia Kovelman, and they're split across these two areas. And I mean, that's one thing to sort of explore when you talk to professors ahead of time, because you're really going to have the best chance of getting in if you're clear on which sub area you want to be in. And it's really hard to admit people who are split across areas.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Oh, go ahead, Maddie, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just gonna echo something Lauren mentioned at the beginning when talking about picking schools or mentors, was that I did also. So I started with like universities that I knew I would want to apply to and that I would want to go to. So don't apply to schools that you know you won't be happy there either. So even if there is a professor there doing spot on to a T everything you want to study, if it's somewhere you know that you're going to be miserable at, it is not worth the money for the application or the 5 years that you would spend there. So they kind of can work hand in hand, like if you have a strong preference either way somewhere, but definitely like picking who you want to work with for 5 years. So what topics you want to be involved in, and very like grad school is your life for the time you're there. So
Thank you so much.
any last questions that we could answer while we're all here? We're gonna give you guys the presenters' emails also. We'll send out a little post recap email to all of you. And so you'll have our contact information if you wanna like reach out to anyone specifically after this that like talked about something you want more information on or anything like that also.
I really want to thank you all for all the time you spent with us. Dr. Wiseman for putting this together, along with Natasha and Dr. Bolin for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. All of you graduate students are supposed to be in the lab. I know that. But this means so much to me because I'm dedicated to opening up opportunities for our students here that are largely non-traditional, that don't see this as an opportunity. And I think that probably explains why we have a low response here from students, but I'm gonna do everything to expand that for the next time that we do this. I think this program that you presented and organized is really critical information, knowledge that students can then take forward. We have a small cluster here today, but I know that they'll talk and spread the word for the next time. Right, guys? Yeah.
Well, and also thank you, Dr. Castaneda, for facilitating this interaction between University of Michigan and University of Texas at El Paso. You've been so helpful to us and putting us in touch with great students. So we're more than happy to come and present, and just thank you for everything you did as well.
I'm a Wolverine, so I'm biased too.
Yes, thank you for having us. We also recorded the session, so hopefully we'll be able to get that out to you guys soonish. And then you can also disseminate it to the rest of the psychology department. So it's not just the students that came. We know that students have other obligations and we don't want that to limit what access they have. So.
I can agree with Dr. Castaneda. Real quick, like I was kind of unsure about attending this because I personally do feel like because the University of Michigan is such a prestigious school, it is intimidating, and I don't feel necessarily like I have like the cutting edge application or, you know, things like that. It's just an intimidating thing. So I think he's probably right as to like why attendance might be low. But it was a very helpful meeting, and I'm very grateful because I got a lot out of it personally. So thank you guys.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, I'm glad this was helpful for you. And I hope that more students come in the future.
And just remember, we're all people too. So, you know, it may seem intimidating, but we're just like you. And we just really love working with students. So, and I think that's generally true in academia, is that professors, graduate students, we seem intimidating, but we're really just like you. In fact, I was talking to an expert the other day who said to me, half the time I feel like I don't know anything. I just learn it like an hour before I have to present. And I said, but you sound so knowledgeable. And the person was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I'm like, but you must, because when you present, you know everything. And she said to me, yeah, but I just get it at the very last minute, you know, so we're really not that different from you guys.
I just want to say that on interviews, and maybe it's because I'm still a junior, but I don't think so. I'm also intimidated by the applicants when they come talk to me. You guys are often the people who are coming through are so amazing, and I'm floored as well when I talk to a lot of you guys. I remember interviewing Eric when he came, and I was like, this guy's impressive.
Very cool.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording, but we can continue talking after that. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody, so much. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye, everybody.
you.